Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if ISSEI teleported in Hazbin Hotel and Harem? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Nefarious Doctor for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. As much as hell suffers from the purging fires of Extermination Day, heaven too has its concerns. In recent times, the celestial balance has shifted. Devils have begun to amass too much power over humanity. The lure of forbidden desires, the promise of power or pleasure, had driven countless souls into contracts with the infernal. This growing influence of devils was tilting the scales of existence, threatening to unravel the divine order. In the hallowed halls of heaven, the seraphim convened, their radiant wings stretching wide as they discussed the alarming rise of sin in the mortal realm. It was no longer enough to contain the infernal scourge to hell. Devils had embedded themselves deep in the hearts of humanity, preying on their lusts and weaknesses. Something had to be done. The solution was grim but necessary: earthly extermination day. It was one day a year a night when angels, led by the highest of the seraphim, descended upon the world under the cover of darkness, seeking out the sinful and the damned. Their targets were the territories where the devil's heirs and heiresses lived and made contracts with humans. One of them was Town, a nexus of demonic activity where devils, humans, and the supernatural coexisted in precarious secrecy. Devils had planted their roots deep within the town, seducing humans into contracts that further empowered hell's legions. But tonight, heaven would strike back. The angels moved with purpose, their forms shining like beacons against the moonlit sky. Where once they were messengers of peace, they now served as executioners, their orders clear: cleanse the streets of the lustful and perverse. Slay the contracted humans, not part of the devil's peerage. Restore the balance between heaven and hell. Tonight the devils would learn their place, and sinful humans would feel the righteous wrath of heaven. 4 of them were a perverted trio and a perverted glasses as well, since they'll make a big splash in hell. Whether it's good or bad is up to them. A year before canon, Rias sighed deeply, looking out into the moonlit streets of Town, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. "Isn't there anything we can do, Sona?" she asked, her voice strained with a mixture of frustration and concern. "I know they're sinful, but they don't deserve to die like this. Some of them are just lost." Sona pushed her glasses up again, her eyes reflecting the same burden, though her expression remained composed. "Rias, we can't interfere. You know that. This was the deal. The new Mao faction agreed to it," she said, her voice firm but sympathetic. "Once a year, after the extermination in hell, the angels come to earth. They target any human who has given in to sin, who has made deals with devils that aren't part of our peerages." Rias' eyes narrowed. "But it's cruel. We should protect them." Sona shook her head. "We can't. In exchange for our safety and the safety of our peerage members, the Mao agreed to these terms. We're untouched, and our peerages remain protected as long as we abide by the arrangement. It's the only way to keep the balance between heaven and hell." Rias clenched her fists, her knuckles turning white. She hated it, every part of it. But Sona was right. There was nothing they could do without breaking the fragile peace that had been brokered. Flashback. In the grand hall of the new Mao faction stronghold, the atmosphere was tense, the air heavy with the unspoken weight of the decision that was about to be made. The Mao of the faction, including Serzex Lucifer and Seraphal Leviathan, stood before a group of resplendent seraphim, their wings radiant and eyes cold with divine authority. Michael, the leader of heaven's forces, stood at the forefront, his expression stoic but resolute. Serzex, dressed in his regal black and red attire, spoke first, his voice calm yet underpinned by the gravity of the moment. "We understand your concerns about the growing influence of devils over humanity. The contracts, the corruption, it's all part of the balance we've upheld for eons." Michael's golden eyes gleamed, his wings shifting slightly as he responded, his tone unyielding. "The balance has been tipped too far in hell's favor. Too many souls are being dragged down, too many lives tainted by the desires you prey upon. Heaven cannot stand idly by while your kind continues to poison the world." Seraphal, standing beside Serzex, narrowed her eyes, her usual playful demeanor gone. "So what are you suggesting, Michael? Another war? Haven't we already spilled enough blood to last us several millennia?" Michael raised a hand, silencing the tension that was beginning to bubble over. "We do not want war. But we will act if necessary. The proposal is simple. Once a year, after the extermination in hell, angels will descend upon the mortal realm. We will rid the world of those who have sucked to sin and lust, those who have entered contracts with devils and have strayed too far from salvation. Cerzek's jaw clenched. And what of our peerages? Will they be targeted? Michael's gaze softened, if only slightly. No. Peerage members will be spared, as will any devil protected by their ranks. We will not break the accords of your system. But any human not within your direct care, anyone who has willingly made a pact with hell outside of your influence, will face divine judgment. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of the deal sinking in. And if we refuse? Cerzek asked, his voice low and dangerous. Michael's wings flared slightly, glowing brighter in the dim light of the hall. Then heaven will no longer hold back. If the contracts continue to grow unchecked, we will be forced to intervene, and the peace between heaven and hell will collapse. War will be inevitable. Sarah Fall glanced at Cerzek, her eyes filled with reluctance but also understanding. The Mao couldn't afford a war, not with so many pieces of their world still fractured from the previous conflicts with the old Mao faction. Cerzek closed his eyes for a brief moment, contemplating the future. Then, he opened them, his gaze hardening as he faced Michael. We accept your terms. 1 day a year, you may carry out your earthly extermination. But you will not touch our peerages, nor will you harm any devil who serves under us. Michael inclined his head. Agreed. May this arrangement bring balance back to our realms. End of flashback. Rias' mind snapped back to the present. She could still picture her brother standing in that hall, making the deal that now left her feeling so powerless. She hated it, but Sona was right. The deal had been made, and tonight, heaven would descend upon Ko Town. Do you think the extermination will reach us here? Rias asked softly, the doubt clear in her voice. Sona hesitated for a moment, glancing out into the night. I hope not. But if it does, we'll be ready. ISSEI Hayadu strolled down the quiet streets of Ko Town with his usual crew, Matsuda, Motohama, and Aika Kiryu, laughing and joking around after a long night of watching an action-packed movie marathon. It was late, but the excitement from the movies still buzzed in the air, giving the four friends a burst of energy that made them forget about the hour. Man, that last movie was epic! Matsuda exclaimed, running a hand through his shaved head. The way that guy took down the whole army by himself? Straight up badass. Motohama, adjusting his glasses, grinned. Yeah, but did you see the lead actress in that bikini scene? She was a total 10 out of 10. Issei, naturally, chimed in with his thoughts, his eyes gleaming. I know. That was the best part. They sure know how to keep us entertained. Gotta love those special effects, am I right? He nudged Matsuda and Motohama, all three of them snickering like the perverted trio they were known to be. Aika Kiryu rolled her eyes but smirked. You guys are hopeless, seriously. You spent the whole movie marathon drooling over the actresses. Typical. Issei shot her a mock, serious look. Hey, don't act like you weren't looking too. You were the one who picked that marathon after all. Yeah, but I was actually watching the movies, unlike you idiots, Aika shot back, but there was a playful tone in her voice. Besides, you boys should learn to keep your drooling under control before you drown yourselves. The group's laughter filled the empty streets, their worries far behind them. Tomorrow was Saturday, so there were no classes, no homework, just a weekend of relaxation and fun to look forward to. They were too engrossed in their conversation to notice how still the night had become, how the usual hum of the town had quieted down to an eerie silence. Issei stretched his arms over his head as they walked through a park, the moonlight casting faint shadows on the ground. Man, it's a perfect night. No school, good movies, and a nice walk home. Can't get much better than this. But as they rounded a corner, the air shifted. The temperature seemed to drop, a chill seeping into the atmosphere that hadn't been there before. Aika was the first to notice. Hey, do you guys feel that? She asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Issei blinked, looking around. Feel what? The cold? I dunno, maybe it's just getting late. Matsuda rubbed his arms. Yeah, it's freezing all of a sudden. Weird. Wasn't this cold earlier? Before they could process the strange change, the streetlights flickered. One by one, they went out, leaving only the pale glow of the moon above. The group stopped in their tracks, confusion and unease settling over them. Okay, now that's freaky, Motohama muttered, adjusting his glasses nervously. Issei frowned, glancing around, trying to shake off the sudden tension. Probably just a power outage or something. Let's keep moving. But as they took a step forward, the shadows moved. Dark, hooded figures emerged from the darkness, their forms silently gliding toward them. Issei's eyes widened, and his heart began to race, instinctively feeling that something was very wrong. Who the hell are they? Matsuda whispered, his voice barely audible. There were 5 of them, their faces obscured by hoods, but their presence was unmistakably menacing. The symbols of crosses and holy runes adorned their cloaks, and each one carried a weapon gleaming under the moonlight: swords, spears, and other tools of divine judgment. Exorcists? Aika asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. What the hell are exorcists doing here? What is this early Halloween? The group began to back up slowly, fear starting to take hold. Issei swallowed hard. Is this some kind of weird prank or something? This can't be real, right? But the exorcists made no sound, their eyes glowing faintly under their hoods. Then, the one in the lead stepped forward, raising a hand as if in judgment. His voice, deep and commanding, echoed in the still night. You have been found guilty of indulging in sin, of harboring lust in your hearts, and of straying from the path of righteousness. By the divine order of heaven, your contracts with sin are to be severed. Issei's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing to make sense of the situation. What the hell are you talking about? We didn't do anything. What contracts? The exorcist's gaze pierced through him, unwavering. Your actions have tainted your souls. Tonight, divine judgment is upon you. Without warning, they raised their weapons, and a pulse of divine energy surged through the air. The ground beneath them cracked, glowing with holy light. The exorcists moved with deadly purpose, circling Issei, Matsuda, Motohama, and Aika like predators closing in on their prey. Aika gritted her teeth, stepping forward. This is insane. You can't just come here and charge us with whatever fantasy you've cooked up. We're not part of any supernatural. Before she could finish, one of the exorcists lunged, his blade stopping just short of her throat. The sharp point hovered in front of her, the light reflecting off her glasses as her face went pale. Your ignorance does not absolve you, the exorcist hissed. The sins of lust, greed, and perversion weigh heavy on your souls. Issei's stomach churned as the realization hit him. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some prank. These people, these exorcists, were here to kill them for real. Run! Issei shouted, grabbing Matsuda and Motohama by the arms as Aika bolted ahead of them after kicking the exorcist in the balls, causing that one to collapse. But the exorcists were fast, too fast. They closed in from every side, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. There was no escape. Issei's mind raced, panic flooding his veins. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure: they were trapped, and these exorcists had no intention of letting them go. As the group scrambled in a futile attempt to escape, they could barely make sense of what was happening. Panic had replaced their earlier carefree attitude, and the air was thick with fear. Issei's heart pounded in his chest, his mind a blur of confusion and terror. What the hell is going on? Aika shouted, her voice breaking as she glanced around frantically, looking for any escape route. Why are they doing this to us? We didn't do anything wrong. Matsuda yelled, fear lacing his words as he stumbled, pulling Motohama along with him. Motohama, who was breathing heavily, nodded, his glasses slipping down his nose as he tried to keep up. This can't be real. Exorcists don't just kill people, but their protests fell on deaf ears. The exorcists, moving with a cold, almost mechanical precision, circled them like predators playing with their prey. Their movements were calm and methodical, as though they had done this countless times before. This was no random attack, it was a calculated execution. One exorcist, a tall figure with a glowing sword in hand, moved swiftly. Before anyone could react, the exorcist leaped high into the air, his blade shimmering under the moonlight. Time seemed to slow down for a moment as the sword arced downward. Motohama, watch out! Issei screamed, but it was too late. The sword came down with brutal force, piercing Motohama from above. The blade sliced clean through his chest, the force of the impact sending him crashing to the ground. Blood sprayed out, painting the cold pavement as Motohama's body went limp, his glasses slipping from his face as he stared up at the night sky in shock. And Motohama! Matsuda shrieked, his voice cracking with disbelief and horror. Issei stood frozen, his brain unable to process what had just happened. His friend, his perverted, obnoxious, yet loyal friend, was dead. A soft, almost gentle fluttering of wings filled the air, and a blinding light descended from the sky. The exorcist who had delivered the fatal blow stepped back as a radiant figure, an angel, landed gracefully beside Motohama's body. Her white wings spread wide, casting a glowing aura around her that illuminated the scene. Her long, flowing robes glistened with holy light, and her eyes, filled with righteous judgment, settled on the three remaining friends. In one smooth motion, she reached down and reclaimed her sword, pulling it free from Motohama's chest with a sickening sound. The blood on the blade evaporated instantly as the divine energy purified it. She pointed the glowing weapon at Issei, Matsuda, and Aika, her face cold and emotionless. "You are not getting away," the angel declared, her voice calm but laced with an unyielding authority that made Issei's blood run cold. "Your sins have been judged. Tonight you will face the consequences." Aika's eyes were wide with shock. "This isn't real, this can't be real." The angel ignored her, turning her gaze to Motohama's lifeless body as she began to recite his charges. "Motohama Tatsuya," she spoke with a chilling calmness as if reading from a divine ledger. "You are guilty of indulging in the sin of lust, repeatedly giving in to your base desires. You have objectified women, reduced them to nothing but objects of pleasure, and sought to fulfill your perversions without regard for the sanctity of the soul. For this, your life is forfeit, and your soul condemned to hell." Issei stood there, his body trembling. He wanted to scream, to fight back, to do something, but he was rooted to the spot, helpless. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his heart pounded in his chest as the angel turned to him next. "Issei Hayadu," she intoned, her glowing eyes locking onto him. "You, too, are guilty of the sin of lust. Your heart is tainted by impurity, and your thoughts clouded by desires of the flesh. You have given in to temptation time and time again, seeking nothing but physical pleasure. Your life shall also be taken, and your soul sent to the infernal flames." "No, no, no, no!" Issei stammered, backing up until he bumped into Matsuda, who was trembling just as much as he was. "We didn't do anything that bad. We're just—" "There is no room for excuses," the angel cut him off, her voice unwavering. "Your sins have been measured, and you have been found wanting." The angel then turned her gaze to Matsuda, who was shaking his head in denial, tears streaming down his face. "Matsuda Shuji," she continued, "you are no different from your friends. You have reveled in sinful thoughts and perverted actions. Your obsession with the pleasures of the body has led you down a path of damnation." Finally, the angel's gaze fell on Aika. Though she tried to keep her composure, Aika's legs buckled slightly under the weight of the angel's judgment. "Aika Kiryu," the angel said, her tone no softer. "While you have not indulged in the same depths of lust as these men, you have encouraged their behavior. You have fostered an environment where their sinful nature could flourish unchecked. For this, you too must face judgment." The angel raised her sword once more, the blade gleaming with holy light. Issei's heart felt like it was about to explode. He couldn't believe what was happening. This wasn't how things were supposed to end. They were just ordinary high school students. How had it come to this? "This can't be real," Matsuda muttered, his voice barely audible, his legs shaking. "This isn't how we're supposed to go out, not like this." But the exorcist stepped closer, surrounding them, their eyes devoid of any mercy. The angel held her sword high, ready to strike, her voice filled with the divine authority of heaven. "Tonight you shall face divine retribution for your sins. May your souls find no rest in the fires of hell." The angel, her expression void of emotion, fixed her gaze on Aika. With a smooth, almost practiced motion, she raised her sword. Time seemed to slow down as Issei, Matsuda, and Aika stared in disbelief, their minds struggling to accept what was happening. Aika stepped back, her hands trembling. "No, no, please," but the angel moved with swift, brutal efficiency. The blade came down in a flash of light, slicing through the air. Aika barely had time to scream before the sword pierced her chest, silencing her forever. Her body crumpled to the ground, lifeless, a pool of blood beginning to spread beneath her. "Aika!" Matsuda's voice cracked with horror as he watched his friend fall. His eyes widened in rage and desperation, and without thinking, he lunged at the angel, his fists raised. "You bastards!" The angel didn't even flinch, but before Matsuda could reach her, one of the exorcists raised a gleaming gun, the barrel pointed directly at his chest. There was no hesitation, no warning, just a loud bang that echoed through the night. Matsuda's body jerked as the bullet tore through him, and he stumbled backward, his hands clutching his chest as blood poured from the wound. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, his life slipping away as he stared up at the darkened sky. ISSEI, frozen in place, could only watch as his friends were slaughtered one by one. His body trembled uncontrollably, his legs refusing to move. He wanted to run, to fight, to scream, but fear had paralyzed him. His mind raced, but there was no escape. Suddenly, he felt a sharp, burning pain sear through the back of his legs. He screamed in agony as he collapsed to the ground, his legs no longer able to support him. He glanced back, his vision blurred by pain, to see a different exorcist standing over him. She was tall, with pale skin and a smile that was too cold to be human. Her eyes gleamed with a sadistic light as she stepped closer, her sword dripping with his blood. It was Lut. ISSEI had heard about the exorcists of hell, the enforcers of heaven who descended upon hell to purge it of its sinners, but he never imagined he would face one in person. And certainly not like this, since they were different from how his old friend Rin described them. Lut smiled cruelly, her voice a cold whisper. "Look at you, crawling on the ground like a worm. How pathetic. It's hilarious how you are somehow friends with Irina Shidu. Someone as corrupt and vile as you doesn't deserve to be friends with a real angel." ISSEI tried to crawl away, but Lut raised her sword and slashed again, this time severing his right arm. The pain was indescribable, a white-hot agony that tore through him. ISSEI screamed, his voice hoarse and broken as he clutched the bloody stump where his arm had been. Lut tilted her head as if amused by his suffering. "Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to kill you just yet. I like to take my time with souls like yours." She stepped forward, raising her sword once again. ISSEI tried to scream, tried to plead, but the words caught in his throat as she brought the blade down again, slicing off his left arm. His body convulsed from the pain, his vision going white as his mind struggled to stay conscious. "Please just end it," he gasped, barely able to speak through the pain. But Lut still needed to finish ISSEI. She crouched down beside him, her smile widening as she raised her sword one more time. "Oh no, we're far from done, ISSEI Hayadu. You see, there's something I enjoy about watching filth like you squirm." With one final, merciless swing, she severed both his legs, leaving him a broken, bleeding mess on the ground. ISSEI's world was nothing but pain. His vision blurred, his consciousness slipping as he begged for death. "Please kill me, I can't take it." Lut scoffed, standing over him as she wiped the blood from her blade. "Pathetic. You beg for mercy after everything you've done? You're nothing more than a worm." She raised her sword, this time aiming for his throat. With a swift, precise strike, she drove the blade deep into his neck. ISSEI gurgled, his body convulsing as blood filled his mouth. He gasped for air, choking on his blood as the world around him grew dim. Still, Lut wasn't satisfied. She crouched down beside him again, her cold smile never fading as she placed the tip of her sword over his chest. Slowly, she pressed it into his skin, piercing his heart. The pain was unbearable, but ISSEI was beyond screaming now. He could only watch as the life drained from him. Lut leaned in close, her voice a chilling whisper. "You will never know love, ISSEI Hayadu. Not in life. Not in death. Your soul will wander the inferno, unloved and unwanted for eternity." With one final twist of the blade, Lut ended his life. ISSEI's eyes, filled with pain and terror, glazed over as his body went limp. Lut stood up, wiping her blade clean once more before turning away from the broken remains of the perverted trio and Aika. "This is just the beginning," Lut said as she grabbed a grenade of sorts and let it explode on the corpses. As blue flames consumed their bodies before, there was no trace of them remaining, not even a drop of blood. As she walked away, her wings fluttered softly behind her, and she disappeared into the night with the human exorcists, and smiled as he looked at the other corrupt humans in her sight. "Don't allow a single vile human escape!" Lut shouted as the night was filled with bloodshed and screams. Many hours later, 6 a.m., Rias sat in her home, the quiet of the night shattered only by the occasional distant scream. She could hear the faint echoes of the chaos outside, knowing full well what was happening, yet helpless to intervene. Her hands were clenched into fists, her knuckles white as the guilt weighed heavily on her chest. She had known this night was coming, and yet, the reality of it was unbearable. They were dying out there. ISSEI, Matsuda, Motohama, Aika, all of them. Ordinary humans caught in the crossfire of a war they knew nothing about. The deal her brother and the new malfaction had made with the angels, the deal that kept them, the devils, and their peerages safe, came at a terrible cost. Every year, innocent souls were purged, their sins judged by heaven's cold, merciless hands, and tonight she could do nothing but sit back and watch. Is this what I've become? Rias whispered to herself, her voice hollow. No better than the old malfaction, sacrificing humans for our safety. The thought burned through her. She had fought so hard to break away from that legacy, to stand for something different, for something better. But here she was, complicit in the extermination of innocent lives, unable to lift a finger to stop it. Her mind was filled with images of ISSEI's dumb grin, Matsuda and Motohama's ridiculous antics, and Aika's sharp wit, all of them gone now, erased by the cold blade of an angel's sword. She thought of ISSEI more than the others. He was always so vibrant, so full of life. His perverted nature had often earned him scolding glances from her, but deep down, she had grown fond of him. He had a kindness about him hidden beneath his lustful exterior, a kindness that was now extinguished. Her heart ached, the guilt gnawing at her insides. It was a bitter, suffocating feeling, one that made her question everything she stood for. How could she call herself their protector, their leader, when she hadn't lifted a finger to save them? She turned away from the window where she had been staring out into the darkness. The faint glow of the rising sun was beginning to creep over the horizon, signaling the end of the extermination. The screams had long since faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The Exorcists and their lead angel would soon be leaving, satisfied with their night's work. A knock at her door brought her out of her thoughts. Rias, Sona's voice was soft but heavy with the same burden Rias felt. They're leaving. Rias didn't respond immediately, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She could hear the sound of wings fluttering in the distance as the Exorcists and their angelic leader took flight, leaving Code Town behind. She knew they would offer their thanks for the devil's compliance, but Rias couldn't bring herself to care. Thanking us for not interfering, Rias muttered bitterly under her breath. As if we had a choice. Sona entered the room quietly, standing beside her. She didn't say anything at first, merely observing the quiet sunrise alongside her friend. There was a heaviness between them, the weight of their guilt and sorrow palpable. Finally, Sona spoke. I've gathered the files, the names of the ones who were taken tonight. Her voice was tightly controlled, but Rias could hear the strain behind it. I thought we should at least look through them. To pay our respects, if nothing else. Rias nodded, though her body felt numb. What else could they do now? Together, they walked to the large table where the files had been set out. Rias hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding as she reached for the first one. It felt so small in her hands, and yet it was filled with the life of someone who was now gone. She opened it slowly. The first file was Motohama's. His glasses and lecherous grin stared back at her from the photograph clipped inside. Her hands trembled slightly as she read through his details, his age, his family, his school grades. All so normal, so mundane. Yet, his life had been snuffed out as if he were nothing more than a statistic, his sins judged without mercy. Matsuda's file came next. His face, too, was familiar, though Rias had never known him personally beyond his perverted reputation. It didn't matter now, he too was gone. And then, ISSEI. Rias paused when she reached his file. Her heart clenched painfully as she looked at his photo, his goofy smile staring back at her. He had been so full of life, so hopeful in his strange way. And now he was just another name on a list of casualties. Sona placed a hand on Rias' shoulder, her own eyes reflecting the sorrow she felt. It's not fair, Rias. We know that. But we're bound to this agreement. If we hadn't complied, it would have been far worse. I know, Rias whispered, though the words felt hollow. But knowing doesn't make it easier. The two of them continued to look through the files in silence, each name a reminder of the cost of the peace they had secured. With every new file, Rias' guilt deepened, and she wondered if this was how it would always be, year after year, watching innocents die so that they could live in safety. When the last file was closed, Sona quietly collected them and placed them back in the folder. The sun was fully up now, casting light over Code Town as if nothing had happened. But Rias knew better. She stood by the window once again, staring out at the peaceful town that had been stained with blood during the night. Her hands clenched into fists once more. I won't forget this, Sona, Rias said softly, her voice filled with quiet determination. I won't let their deaths be meaningless. Sona nodded beside her. Neither will I. The sun continued to rise, but for Rias, it brought no comfort. Only the promise of more nights like this and the hope that one day they could find a way to end the cycle of death and retribution. But let's see how they are doing, shall we? ISSEI's consciousness flickered in and out, the pain of his death still fresh in his mind. His last memories were of Lut's cold smile, her merciless sword, and the searing agony of his heart being pierced. He should have been dead, and yet he felt strange. His body, if it could even be called a body, was no longer in agony, but it wasn't normal either. He felt different, as if he were floating in some void, his mind suspended between worlds. Suddenly, a sharp jolt coursed through him, pulling him out of the nothingness. ISSEI gasped, blinking as his vision returned. He was standing, or rather floating, on a platform of obsidian stone, surrounded by fire and brimstone. The air was thick and heavy with the scent of sulfur, and the sky above him was a swirling mass of black clouds tinged with red. The landscape was both terrifying and beautiful in a twisted way. Hell! ISSEI looked down at himself, his eyes widening in shock. His body had changed. His skin, once pale and human, was now a deep shade of crimson, with black veins pulsing just beneath the surface. His hands were no longer human either. His fingers had elongated into sharp, claw-like appendages, and faint flames licked up his arms, flickering out at his shoulders. He felt taller and leaner, and his muscles were more defined, but everything about him seemed demonic. His hair was still the same spiky mess it had always been, but it was darker, almost jet black, and two small, curved horns had sprouted from his forehead. He glanced behind him and nearly jumped in shock. A long, pointed tail flicked back and forth, ending in a sharp barb, and leathery wings extended from his back. They were small, still growing, but unmistakably there. ISSEI looked at his reflection in a nearby pool of molten lava, seeing a face that was both his and yet utterly different. His eyes were a fiery orange, glowing with an inner flame, and his grin, he had fangs. Actual fangs. What the hell happened to me? ISSEI whispered, his voice a bit rougher than before. Before he could process any further, a voice boomed from above him, rich with authority and dark amusement. Welcome to hell, ISSEI Hayadu. ISSEI's head snapped up, and his breath caught in his throat as he saw him. Lucifer, the king of hell himself, stood before him, towering and magnificent. His appearance was regal yet terrifying. A slender-figured fallen angel who sports a close resemblance to his daughter, Charlie, having her white skin with rosy cheeks, blonde hair with thin, light coral streaks on the thicker, paler blonde highlights, and eyes with light yellow sclera and red pupils. His mouth is full of sharp teeth, his hair is cut short and has been slicked back in a ducktail hairstyle with one tuft sticking out, his pupils are slit like a snake, and his cheeks are a paler shade of red. In addition, he also has sharp black eyebrows, his eyelids are light purple, and his tongue is forked. Lucifer's white and red clothing is somewhat like that of a circus ringmaster. He wears a wide-brimmed white top hat with a golden snake and a red apple over golden spikes, which resemble a crown, and a red-lined and red-trimmed white popped-collared suit with 8 golden buttons, his coat worn over a light red and white striped waistcoat with 2 golden buttons and a small, accessorized black bow tie. He also wore a set of heeled black knee-high boots and forearm-length dark gray gloves. On his left pinky, he sports a golden ring, which is presumably his wedding ring. He also had an apple-topped black cane that matched his hat. Due to his angelic origins, he possesses 6 white wings with red feathers, which he can extend from his coat. A slender-figured fallen angel with white skin and rosy cheeks, blonde hair with thin, light coral streaks on the thicker, paler blonde highlights, and eyes with light yellow sclera and red pupils, and due to his angelic origins, he possesses 6 white wings with red feathers, which he can extend from his coat. ISSEI couldn't help but tremble under Lucifer's gaze. There was something about him that was both mesmerizing and horrifying. Power radiated from him, suffocating and undeniable. "You're Lucifer?" ISSEI stammered, trying to make sense of it all. Lucifer's smile widened, revealing sharp, perfect teeth. "Indeed. And you, ISSEI Hayadu, have found yourself in a rather unique position." ISSEI's mind was still racing, and he struggled to speak. What happened? I don't understand. One moment I was alive, and now I'm here. Why? What did I do? Lucifer waved a hand dismissively as if the details were of little importance to him. Ah, yes. Let's get to the heart of the matter, shall we? You were killed by one of heaven's exorcists for your, how shall I put it, excessive indulgences. He chuckled darkly. You were judged for your sins, ISSEI. Lust, debauchery, and general perversion. Quite fitting, isn't it? ISSEI's brow furrowed. But I didn't do anything that bad, did I? I mean, yeah, I'm a bit perverted, but… Lucifer raised a hand, silencing him. Oh, don't be modest. Your reputation precedes you, ISSEI. You were known, even among your peers, as the perverted trio. However, it seems you alone carried the title of the incarnation of lust. ISSEI blinked in shock. Incarnation of lust? That's what they called me? Lucifer's eyes glinted with amusement. It's rare to see such dedication to a sin. I'm rather impressed. ISSEI still couldn't wrap his head around everything. So that's why I was killed? Because of that? Lucifer nodded slowly. Yes. You were a prime target for heaven's purge. Sins like lust and desire draw their attention, and they love to cleanse the world of those who indulge a bit too much. But you see, ISSEI, here in hell we celebrate such things. Lucifer's smile grew wider, more sinister. Normally, all sinners end up in pride. That's where the majority of human souls reside after their judgment. But you, my dear boy, are a special case. You've caught my attention. Your sins of lust are far too prominent to be wasted in pride. ISSEI swallowed hard. What does that mean? It means, Lucifer continued, stepping closer, you will not be spending your eternity in pride. No, ISSEI Hayadu, I have something far more fitting in mind for you. You will be sent to the ring of lust. You will be the first sinner ever to be placed outside of pride. ISSEI blinked, stunned. The lust ring? What is that? Lucifer chuckled, his wings spreading out behind him, casting a dark shadow over ISSEI. It's exactly what you think it is. A place where lust reigns supreme, where desire and passion are the currency of the realm. And you, my little incarnation of lust, will fit right in. ISSEI's mind reeled at the thought, but something about it made a strange sense. His desires had driven his entire life, and now, even in death, it seemed that would define him. Lucifer's voice grew softer but no less menacing. Consider this an opportunity, ISSEI. Most sinners spend their eternity drowning in their regrets and failures and pride. But you have a chance to embrace what you truly are. ISSEI hesitated, unsure of what to say. I don't even know what I am anymore. Lucifer leaned in closer, his eyes gleaming with devilish intent. You are exactly where you belong, ISSEI. Welcome to hell. And with that, the ground beneath ISSEI's feet shifted, the fires of hell swirling around him as he was pulled downwards towards his new home, the ring of lust. Lucifer watched as ISSEI was dragged down into the fiery depths, the swirling flames consuming him as the portal to the lust ring opened. A satisfied smile curled at the corners of the devil's lips. The incarnation of lust, huh? ISSEI Hayadu's fate was sealed, but his journey was only beginning. Lucifer turned his attention to the files that floated beside him, each bearing the names of the other 3 individuals who had died that night alongside ISSEI. These humans had been far from ordinary, and now, even in death, they would be reshaped into something far more fitting for the sins they had lived by. He reached for the first file, Matsuda. Matsuda Wrath. In life, Matsuda had been a foolish, perverted youth, consumed by his lust and desires, much like his friends. But in his final moments, something else had surfaced: rage. Pure, untapped fury had burned within him when he saw his friends being cut down, the helplessness of his situation transforming into a blind hatred. That spark of wrath had drawn the attention of hell, and it had decided his fate. As Matsuda was sent to the ring of wrath, his body underwent a grotesque transformation, his human form warping into something far more befitting of the seething rage within him. His skin turned dark, smoldering red, muscles bulging unnaturally as his height shot up. His face elongated, taking on the features of a wild boar, tusks jutting out from his jaw, glistening with malice. His eyes, now a glowing ember orange, reflected the rage he carried inside. His arms became massive, like clubs, with long, sharp claws that scraped the ground as he moved. Black fur sprouted across his back, and his breathing became heavy, like the snorting of an enraged beast. A deep growl rumbled in his chest as his new form completed itself. Matsuda had become a savage embodiment of wrath, perfectly suited for the violent chaos of the Wrath Ring. Lucifer moved to the next file, his finger brushing over the name. Motohama. Motohama agreed. Motohama, the so-called perverted glasses, had always prided himself on his intelligence, but greed corrupted his mind in the form of lust. His endless desire for knowledge, paired with his insatiable need for personal satisfaction, made him a prime candidate for the ring of greed, where ambition and desire were everything. As Modahama descended into Mammon's domain, his body began to shift. His thin, lanky frame became more wiry and agile, and his skin turned a shimmering gold, like polished metal. His eyes, hidden behind his signature glasses, glowed with an emerald hue, the lenses reflecting his insatiable thirst for power and indulgence. His face took on the features of a snake, sharp, predatory, with fangs that gleamed wickedly. His fingers extended into long, slender claws, perfect for snatching up anything valuable, anything worth possessing. A forked tongue flicked out between his sharp teeth, and his greed-slicked mind reveled in the possibilities before him. Modahama had been reborn as a cunning, serpentine creature of greed, deceitful, intelligent, and always hungry for more. Lucifer smiled with interest as he turned to the third file, marked Ikakiryu. Ikakiryu Gluttony. Ikakiryu had always stood out, not just because of her sharp tongue and wit but also because of her insatiable curiosity. That desire to consume knowledge, experiences, and other pleasures made her a perfect candidate for Beelzebub's gluttony ring. Gluttony wasn't just about overindulgence in food, it was about devouring everything, pleasure, power, and the very essence of life. As Ika was brought into gluttony, her body transformed drastically. Ika's form in hell reflects her transformation into a hellhound, one of the dominant residents of the gluttony ring. Her body is now sleek and canine, with powerful, muscular limbs built for speed and endurance. Her fur is a dark, glossy black with streaks of deep purple running through it, almost glowing in the dim light of gluttony. Her eyes glow a bright amber, radiating a hunger that goes far beyond mere food. She has sharp, elongated fangs and claws, perfect for tearing through anything that stands in her way. Her new form radiates predatory grace, blending power and agility, and her senses are heightened, making her a perfect predator in the gluttony ring. This hellhound form reflects her endless craving for indulgence, not just for food but for experiences and sensations. Lucifer chuckled as he closed the final file, his gaze sweeping over the group that had been sent into Hell's rings. Each had been transformed, their inner sins brought to the surface, reshaping them into creatures that reflected the darkness in their souls. The perverted trio and Ikakiryu, he couldn't help but admire its symmetry. Each one was a unique case, a perfect specimen of their respective sins, sent to different corners of hell to begin their new existence. The incarnation of lust, the beast of wrath, the serpent of greed, and the gluttonous predator. Lucifer's smile widened as his thoughts turned to what would happen next. The rings of hell were always in flux, their balance of power constantly shifting. These new arrivals, with their peculiar mix of human emotions and demonic essence, were bound to stir things up. And that was exactly what Lucifer wanted. "Let's see what becomes of you all," he murmured, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of amusement and anticipation. "I have a feeling you'll make quite an impression on my domain." The fires of hell roared around him as Lucifer turned away, leaving the sinners to their fates. The rings of hell awaited, and each of them, ISSEI, Matsuda, Modahama, and Ika, would soon discover just how far they could fall in the new world they now called home. When it comes to strength, there are many forms: mental, emotional, and physical. Physical strength was the main thing in the Wrath Ring. It was a given, as brute strength was vital in warfare, which was Satan's specialty. Ever since the fall, he has been in charge of building and leading Hell's armies onto Earth to influence humankind. Naturally, as the centuries progressed, the wars became increasingly stagnant, with the new Mao and the Angel faction coming to a stalemate as humans progressed. But that didn't stop Satan's goal to keep the citizens in his ring bulked up. He was the sin of wrath, a demon that thrived on destruction and war. Even when peace was made, there was always that lingering rage, the need to break something, to overpower those you consider your enemy, to dominate, to win. Asmodeus said he was overcompensating. Belphegor told him to take it easy. Beelzebub tried to get him into less violent hobbies. The rest didn't really care and left him alone. He preferred they all left him alone unless it was to fight, go to the gym, practice for the future apocalypse, or attend one of the thousands of fighting tournaments he held within the rings. They didn't get it. Wrath was what he was. Even before the fall. War was necessary, even if some failed to see it. Strength was more than proving oneself. It was surviving. It was continuing to live. The weak, as pitiful as they were, cannot be carried around on the backs of those who strive to push past the hardship. Not just physically but mentally. To stand against those who tried to break you, but most didn't understand. They just saw an overly buff demon and thought he was nothing more than a dumb jock trying to be the number one man or demon. It's sad that most of his citizens only took Wrath to be physically strong. You can be the buffest, muscle-bound demon in all of hell, but if you break under a little interrogation or fall to pieces over some words, then you're just as pathetic as a newborn. That's how many of his army men are held back. They're strong, no doubt. But brains are not all there. Not that Lucifer cared as much. Cannon fodder, he called them. And Satan didn't blame him. These weren't elite soldiers who could withstand heaven's attack. Randomly charging into battle only helps so much unless one has a plan. So, while the peasant farmers focused on muscle for manual labor, he and the higher demons in Los Santos focused on the technical and strategic side of war. They were studying heaven's constantly evolving warfare, learning how to make their version of it, anything they could do should they ever battle against the still residing angels once more. He was in his library, looking up the human history of warfare for possible future strategies. He had to be on top of everything. As he was reading, he noticed something strange. Sons going into war. Satan knew that it's always been the males that God, his father, seemed to favor. Beelzebub actually called him a asshole during the Great Rebellion once they were confronted. It was always the sons that had to fight. Never the daughters. He remembered when Charlie was born. The joy Lucifer felt. How many would assume that it's a male? Even they all knew that was bullshit. But it made him wonder back then when he asked himself a question. Should he, too, get an heir for his ring? War would eventually come, and with war came death. As history states, most of the time, the prodigies or sons of the generals would take over when their mentors or fathers passed. If something happened to him, well, the ring would be thrown into chaos. With the absence of Satan, there would be power-hungry demons hoping to take over the empire the god of wrath had created. And since his ring was filled with wrathful demons looking to dominate and become the best of the best, becoming the Prince of Wrath would be a prize most would kill to take. Wars would break out in his rings, well, more serious ones, but that's beside the point. So, he needed to ensure that his estate was secured should one of their heavenly siblings take him out. He already stretched out natural means. He wasn't interested in a wife, and he doubted he could find a surrogate who could carry his child to term with his power. Nor if he could sire children naturally, he wouldn't put it past Daddy Dearest to sterilize them before they were kicked out. That left adoption. But how to find a suitable heir? Orphanages were obvious, but it would be pretty noticeable if the freaking King of Wrath walked into an orphanage looking for a kid. While he was the least talked about sin next to sloth, he didn't want the media plastering his business for all of hell to see. Ugh, this was going to be a hassle. How would he even decide which child fit his needs? Was there a standard or curriculum for picking a child? Probably not. Otherwise, it would have been so much easier. Honestly, it was very frustrating. That was until he found him. Hey, Dad? Still reading about human warfare? His son asked as Matsuda walked out of the hallway with a few bandages on his face, which made Satan chuckle at his air, knowing he just came back from his morning workout with his girlfriend, who probably kicked his ass again. But of course, you can't be too prepared for when those doves come down to wrath one day. And yet, they're bound only to attack pride, Matsuda said, knowing that the sin of wrath was cautious of the angel faction. It made sense to him, since if the Exorcists could attack the human realm as well as pride, then what's stopping them from attacking hellborn, imps, or hellhounds? For now, that is. Touché, Matsuda said before placing some breakfast down at his desk, which made Sin chuckle, knowing his son was concerned since he ate breakfast later than Matsuda. Satan watched his son with a mixture of pride and amusement. Matsuda, despite the bruises and bandages from his workout, had a sharp mind and a tactical approach to everything he did, a quality that made him stand out in a realm where brute strength reigned supreme. The boy had grown into a fine warrior, both mentally and physically, and while Satan didn't say it often, he was grateful to have an heir like him. As Matsuda set down the breakfast, Satan leaned back in his chair, his gaze sweeping over the ancient text spread out across his desk. You've been sparring again. How'd it go with your girlfriend? What was her name? Sally? Satan asked, not bothering to hide the teasing note in his voice. Matsuda rolled his eyes but smirked. Close enough. It's Sally Mae Tumbleweed. Her sister was Millie Tumbleweed before she left Wrath with that one guy. Moxie, I think, Matsuda said, recalling the little guy who was more educated than many of the other Wrathians that the former human met during his time in Wrath. Well, apart from that striker guy who kept challenging him when he was around in Wrath, Sally is as fierce as ever. Almost had me pinned this time. Almost? Satan raised an eyebrow. She's been besting you for a while now. I'm learning her moves, Matsuda said confidently, though there was a slight wince as he touched a bruise on his arm. Besides, it keeps me sharp. Oh, please. You fell for her when she kicked your ass the first time, Satan said, knowing his son had a soft spot for strong women, which made the sinner blush as he coughed in his napkin and drank some juice before he replied to his dad. I've still been improving. Satan nodded approvingly. Good. A warrior's mind needs constant sharpening, not just the body. That's why I study this. He gestured to the books on warfare. The angels may be arrogant, but they evolve and adapt. And so must we, especially since they got those fancy holy swords that are poison to our species. Matsuda took a seat across from his father, his expression serious now. Do you really think they'll come after Wrath? I mean, I get that they want to purge hell, but pride has always been their focus due to the overpopulation of sinners in there. Lucifer is the one they want. For now, Satan replied, his voice low and thoughtful. But power draws attention, boy. Wrath isn't just about muscle and fighting, it's about resilience, about never giving in. When they see how we prepare and how we've been building an army, they'll see us as a threat. And threats are eliminated. Matsuda considered this, silent for a moment before he spoke again. Then I need to step up my game. If something happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me, Satan interrupted, though there was a brief flicker of doubt in his eyes. But you're right to prepare. If anything ever did, you'll need to be ready to defend what we've built here. I will be, Matsuda said firmly. But why didn't you tell me sooner that you were thinking about this? About having an heir? Satan sighed, leaning forward. I didn't want you to feel pressured. You've got your path to walk. But now that you're here, strong and sharp enough to handle it, I think you're ready to take on more responsibility. This isn't just about fighting, Matsuda. It's about leading. Matsuda met his father's gaze, his resolve hardening. I won't let you down, Dad, Satan smiled, a rare and fleeting expression on his typically stern face. I know you won't. As the two sat in the quiet of the library, the weight of their future lingered between them. Both knew that the battles ahead wouldn't just be fought with fists and weapons. They would be wars of strategy, survival, and leadership. And while Satan may have been the king of Wrath, his son was quickly proving himself to be a worthy successor, ready to take up the mantle when the time came. So when are you going to bring her over so I can challenge her? Satan asked with a toothy grin, making Matsuda groan at his dad's question. Dad! Matsuda said that since he has yet to tell Sally, he's the Prince of Wrath. He doesn't want to be seen as a blue-blooded royal who looks down on their kind. Also, since he knows his old man would embarrass him, Sally should ask some personal questions about him, which is one conversation he wants to avoid. Now it's time to check out Greed. The cityscape of the Greed Ring glimmered below Motohama's towering penthouse office. Unlike the brutal streets of Wrath or the indulgent fantasies of lust, Greed was a game of calculated moves, where power came not through fists but through deals, alliances, and betrayals. Motohama, a snake in more than just his species, had played this game masterfully. His rise from a small-time businessman to the ruler of a sprawling criminal empire was the stuff of legend in the underworld. And he owed some of it to one being, Mammon, the sin of greed. Motohama leaned back in his leather chair, his long serpentine body coiling comfortably as he let his eyes wander over the vast city. He could still remember when it all started. Mammon saw something in him, a spark of ambition and a talent for manipulation and business, and decided to invest a small piece of his massive wealth in Motohama's first venture. At the time, it seemed like a minor gesture from the sin of greed. But Motohama had taken that seed money and turned it into something far greater. He had started by taking down one of the 5 head crime families, slowly absorbing their assets and consolidating power. That first kill was the hardest, and he did it with finesse. The family he targeted underestimated him, and thought him nothing more than a nuisance in the grand scheme of things. He let them believe that while he bought out their soldiers, turned their accountants, and poisoned their allies, by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. Motohama didn't just take over their territory, he made their wealth his own. Their firepower became his, and their influence, once fractured, was now centralized under his growing empire. One by one, the other families fell. He took his time, learned from his mistakes, and applied pressure when it was needed. He amassed not just weapons but knowledge. He knew the dirty secrets of every underboss and every lieutenant, and used them to his advantage. But when it came to Crimson No Last Name, things became more complicated. Crimson, Moxie's father, wasn't like the others. He was cruel and domineering, but he also had a strange attachment to his son, something Motohama couldn't quite understand at first. Motohama had initially viewed Crimson as just another obstacle. But when he learned more about the toxic influence the man had on Moxie, something clicked in him, a rare moment of empathy. He saw a younger version of himself in Moxie, a man burdened by the expectations and control of those stronger than him. So, when it came time to eliminate Crimson, Motohama decided to make it poetic. "I think you'll find this arrangement fair," Motohama had said to Crimson, his voice smooth and measured like a snake coiling around its prey. "Your empire in exchange for a peaceful retirement. You've run things for long enough. It's time for someone with fresh ideas." Crimson had scoffed, not realizing the danger he was in. But Motohama had planned everything perfectly. That night, Crimson was taken out quietly. Sent to the fishes, as the saying went. But it wasn't about revenge or cruelty. Motohama genuinely believed he was doing Moxie a favor. With Crimson out of the picture, Moxie was free to live his own life, unburdened by his father's shadow. Motohama had taken a deep dive into Crimson's finances after the hit, keeping only what was profitable and discarding the rest. He had no interest in sentimental family businesses or old-fashioned investments. Everything had to serve a purpose, and it had to generate power or wealth. His empire was efficient, sleek, and constantly growing. As he sat back in his chair, Motohama glanced at the clock on his desk. He had a meeting in a few hours, but his mind wandered to his old friends, Matsuda, Aika, and ISSEI. After months of being apart, they had all been reunited recently, and each had their own stories of power and influence. It was ironic, really. In life, they had been close-knit, never imagining they'd all end up in hell. And now, here they were, the disciples of 4 of the 7 deadly sins. They had met up in the Ring of Sloth, a neutral area for them to relax without the weight of their respective responsibilities. The memory brought a rare smile to Motohama's face. It had been good to see them again, especially after learning they each had become representatives of a sin, just like him. Matsuda, now the chosen heir of wrath, carried the burden of war on his shoulders. Aika, a cunning and delectable force in gluttony, had become a favorite of Beelzebub, especially when the queen of the Hellhounds even adopted Aika as her daughter. And ISSEI, their ever-loyal friend, thrived under Asmodeus in lust, his powers growing alongside his appetite for pleasure since he had a small harem in lust and discovered that he was bisexual but mostly into women, which was the same for Aika and Matsuda, but Motohama has his eyes on women alone. Regardless of reality, they were all rising to power, each in their way, just as they had dreamed when they were alive. Motohama chuckled to himself, thinking of how far they had come. It had been a strange, twisted journey, but in the end, they had found success, even if it was in the depths of hell. Pulling his thoughts back to the present, Motohama extinguished his cigar and straightened his suit. He had more work to do and more deals to make. His empire wasn't going to run itself, after all. But as he stood and looked out once more over the gleaming city, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The snake had climbed the ladder of power, and now there was no one left to challenge him. And with his friends by his side, each of them growing stronger in their domains, Hell would soon learn that the disciples of the sins were a force to be reckoned with, especially the angels who damned them to hell. Now for the daughter of gluttony, Aika Kiryu. Aika Kiryu stirred in her plush, oversized bed, the soft silk sheets brushing against her skin as she stretched lazily. The faint smell of freshly baked pastries and sweet syrups wafted through the air, a typical morning scent in the Ring of Gluttony. She smiled to herself, snuggling deeper into the luxurious blankets. Life here was a far cry from the world she had left behind, and that was exactly how she wanted it. In her human life, Aika lived in wealth but not happiness. Her parents were rich, yes, but their absence left a hole in her heart that no amount of money or luxury could fill. Her father had loved her and tried to be present when he could, but business often took him away. Her mother, however, had been a different story, cold, distant, and determined to mold Ika into a reflection of herself, strong, ruthless, and focused on business. But Ika never wanted that. Her mother's expectations had suffocated her, and she rebelled in the only way she knew how, by becoming the infamous perverted female glasses in school, embracing her freedom and reality, rejecting the stiff and proper image her mother had forced on her. But all of that was in the past. Here, in Gluttony, she was free. Free to indulge in everything she had once denied herself, free to embrace pleasure and excess without guilt. And she had found something far more meaningful than wealth: family. Ika opened her eyes and gazed around her room, the golden light filtering through the gauzy curtains, illuminating the feast that had been set out on a long table near the wall. She smiled again, this time wider. Life in Gluttony wasn't just about indulgence, it was about comfort, warmth, and belonging. Something she had never felt before. And it was all thanks to her new mother figure, the sin of gluttony herself, Beelzebub. The thought of her mother figure made her heart swell with warmth. Beelzebub, known for her jovial and carefree nature, had taken Ika under her wing, offering the love and care Ika had never received from her mother. Here in hell, the relationships were unconventional, but the connection between her and Beelzebub was genuine. Where her human mother had tried to mold her into something she wasn't, Bee had let Ika flourish as herself. Just as Ika was about to get up, the door to her room opened, and Beelzebub walked in, a wide smile on her face. The sin of gluttony was as radiant as ever, her large, insect-like wings fluttering gently behind her, her golden hair cascading in waves over her shoulders. She carried an aura of warmth and generosity, and her presence alone filled the room with energy. "Good morning, my sweet," Beelzebub greeted, her voice full of affection as she made her way to Ika's bed. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around her, pulling Ika into a tight embrace. Her touch was warm, almost maternal, and Ika felt her entire body relax into the hug. Ika's heart swelled as she returned to the embrace, feeling safe and loved in a way she never had before. "Good morning, Mom," Ika murmured into her chest, closing her eyes and savoring the moment. Beelzebub's hugs were always like this, warm, comforting, and full of genuine affection, nothing like the stiff, businesslike interactions she had with her human mother. Beelzebub pulled back slightly, her golden eyes filled with warmth as she looked down at Ika. "Did you sleep well, dear? I had some fresh pastries brought in for breakfast, and I thought we could share them before starting the day." Ika nodded, smiling up at her. "I slept great, thanks. And that sounds perfect. You always know how to spoil me." Beelzebub chuckled, her wings twitching with amusement. "Well, that is part of being the queen of gluttony. But I'm glad to see you happy, Ika. You deserve to enjoy life after everything you've been through." Ika's heart softened at her words. Beelzebub had always understood her more than her birth mother ever did. Here in Gluttony, Ika didn't need to be strong or ruthless to survive. She could be herself, indulge in her desires, and live without the pressures of her former life. And Beelzebub had been there for her every step of the way, offering guidance, love, and understanding. They made their way to the table, where a variety of pastries, fruits, and other delectable treats were laid out. As they sat down together, Ika felt a deep sense of contentment wash over her. This was home now, this place, these moments. She was no longer Ika Kiryu, the rebellious girl trying to escape her mother's expectations. She was Ika of Gluttony, a beloved daughter of one of hell's most powerful sins, free to live her life as she pleased. As they ate and chatted about the day ahead, Ika couldn't help but think about her friends. Matsuda, ISSEI, and Motohama, each of them had found their place in hell, rising to power just as she had. It was funny how they had all been drawn to the sins that suited them best. They had even met up not too long ago in Sloth, a neutral zone where they could relax and catch up without any of the pressures of their respective domains. She wondered how they were doing now. No doubt, they were just as busy as she was, building their empires in hell, each in their way. But no matter how far they went or how much power they gained, Ika knew they would always have each other. The bonds they had forged in life hadn't broken in death. If anything, they were stronger now. But for now, as she looked over at Beelzebub, her new mother, Ika felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for this new life, this new family, and the freedom to finally be herself, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. Beelzebub leaned back in her chair, savoring a bite of a glazed pastry before glancing at Ika with a warm smile. "So, sweetie, what's on your agenda for today?" she asked, her tone light and affectionate as she watched Aika pick at her breakfast. Aika stretched her arms over her head, feeling the tension ease out of her shoulders. I'm actually going to hang out with Luna today, she said, smiling at the thought of her friend. She asked for the day off from her dad's company, so we figured we'd spend some time together. She's been really stressed lately, and well, you know how Blitzo is, Aika added with a chuckle. Beelzebub raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Blitzo can be a handful, to say the least, she said with a knowing grin. But I'm glad you're making friends, especially with someone like Luna. She's got a good heart, even if she doesn't show it all the time. Aika nodded, her smile growing softer. Yeah, she's been through a lot, but we get along. It's nice to have a friend who gets what it's like to, adjust to things down here, especially since she's been through hell due to the orphanage she was in. Beelzebub reached out and gently patted Aika's hand. I'm happy for you, darling. Friends like that are important, especially in a place like hell. They continued eating for a few minutes in comfortable silence, but Aika could sense there was something on her mother's mind. Beelzebub was never the type to beat around the bush for long, though, so Aika waited patiently. Sure enough, after a few more bites, Beelzebub cleared her throat and gave Aika a more serious look. Actually, speaking of plans, Beelzebub started, her tone shifting slightly. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. A favor, really. It came in from Pride, from your cousin, Charlie. Aika blinked, setting down her fork. Charlie? Lucifer's daughter? She tilted her head, intrigued but cautious. What's this about? Beelzebub sighed, her wings fluttering gently behind her, as she explained. Charlie's been working on something she calls the Happy Hotel. She's trying to redeem souls so they can enter heaven. She believes it's the only way to stop the exterminations. She thinks if enough souls get redeemed, heaven will stop sending down the Exorcists to kill us off. Aika froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. The fork in her hand clattered against her plate. What? Does she want to redeem souls? To go to heaven? Her voice trembled with a mix of shock and anger. She could already feel the familiar sting of rage bubbling up inside her. You're telling me she thinks we can be saved by the very place that sent those exorcists to wipe us out? Beelzebub nodded slowly, her expression calm though there was a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. That's her idea, yes. And she specifically asked for you and your friends to see the hotel. She thinks you all might be able to help. Aika's fists clenched, her jaw tightening. No way. No way. I'd rather die again than go anywhere near the place those exorcists come from. Her voice grew louder as her anger flared. The memories of her human life came rushing back, of how meaningless her death had felt, how those celestial beings, supposed to be divine, hadn't even blinked as they condemned her to hell. Beelzebub leaned forward slightly, her expression softening as she tried to soothe Aika's frustration. I understand why you feel that way, Aika. Really, I do. The exorcists are brutal, and it's not fair what they've done to us. But this could be a way to help others avoid that same fate. Charlie's intentions are good, even if the idea seems impossible. Aika shook her head, her face still tight with anger. Good intentions don't change what happened to us. They don't stop the fact that those holy bastards will exterminate anyone without a second thought. I'm not about to walk into some hotel and pretend like that can be undone. Beelzebub reached out, placing a gentle hand on Aika's arm. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I want you to think about it. There's still time before the next extermination, about 6 months. Maybe you'll feel differently by then. Aika sighed, her anger simmering but not quite gone. She looked down at her hands, her mind racing. The idea of helping others avoid the same fate was tempting, in a way, but the thought of anything to do with heaven, those who had been complicit in sending her and countless others to hell, made her blood boil. I'll think about it, Aika muttered, though her voice was still tense. But don't get your hopes up. Beelzebub smiled warmly, leaning in to give Aika another comforting hug. That's all I ask, sweetie. Just think about it. And no matter what you decide, I'll be here for you. Aika leaned into the embrace, feeling the warmth and security her mother always brought. Even if she didn't have all the answers right now, at least Aika knew she had someone who understood her, someone who wouldn't push her into anything she wasn't ready for. Thanks, Mom, she murmured. As the warmth of Beelzebub's hug enveloped her, Aika's mind swirled with thoughts of the future, of redemption, revenge, and whether there was any hope for souls like hers in a place like hell. And finally, it was time to check out the Prince of Lust. The lust ring was always humming with a particular energy, But inside ISSEI's room, it was still quiet, until, of course, Kiki decided to remedy that. The succubus stretched luxuriously, her tail slowly uncoiling from around ISSEI's waist as she yawned. Her gaze flickered toward the lust-themed cuckoo clock as it chirped and groaned, signaling the start of the day. With a sly smile, Kiki swung her legs out of bed, giving ISSEI's still sleeping form a fond look. He really could sleep through anything. Kiki knew the one thing that could wake him up with more than just a soft nudge. She grabbed the air horn, gave it a good shake, and without hesitation, blasted it. The blare echoed in the room, and ISSEI groaned, rolling over with mumbled protests and insults under his breath. His face scrunched up, clearly displeased at being ripped out of his slumber. "Oh, come on, big guy," Kiki teased, leaning down to him on the lips, her way of softening the rude awakening. "Good morning, sleepyhead," ISSEI grunted in response, his lips curving into a lazy smile from the morning, he mumbled, his voice gravelly from sleep. Despite hating mornings, he could never resist Kiki's affectionate touch. He finally pushed himself out of bed, stretching his dragon-like frame as he reached for his morning salvation, coffee. He rubbed at his eyes, feeling the weight of last night still lingering in his body. From the other side of the bed, Verasika stirred, stretching in a very deliberate and exaggerated way. She let out a satisfied moan as she arched her back, drawing ISSEI's attention. Last night was fun," she purred, sliding out of the covers and standing up with a sultry smile. ISSEI's face immediately flushed, memories of the previous night rushing back. Verasika sauntered over to him, her hips swaying as she closed the distance. Her mischievous grin widened as she wrapped her arms around his waist. "So," she purred into his ear, her voice dripping with amusement, "how'd you like getting pegged, huh?" ISSEI's cheeks turned a deep shade of red, and he looked away, utterly flustered. "I mean," his response came out jumbled and awkward, the embarrassment clear on his face. He rubbed the back of his neck, trying to compose himself but failing miserably. "Why, it was fine, I guess," he stammered, eyes darting everywhere except Verasika's. Verasika chuckled, clearly enjoying his reaction as she leaned in closer. "You're so cute when you get all flustered like that," she teased, pressing her body against his. ISSEI, still red-faced, could feel the heat from her body but was saved by his self-discipline. He gently tapped her on the forehead with his finger, giving her a sheepish but firm smile. "Business before pleasure, Verasika." "I've got work to do," he said, trying to regain his composure. Verasika pouted, her lips forming into an exaggerated frown. "Ugh, fine," she sighed dramatically, stepping back but still maintaining her playful energy. "But don't forget you owe me later." As ISSEI moved toward the kitchen area to grab his much-needed coffee, Verasika started prepping herself for the day, stretching once more before heading off to work on her latest song. Meanwhile, Kiki was already slipping into her business attire, which managed to highlight her assets in a way that made her look both professional and undeniably wise. She gave ISSEI a knowing look as she adjusted her blouse, clearly enjoying the effect her outfit had on him. ISSEI took a deep breath, letting the aroma of his coffee wake him up a bit more before he turned his attention to Kiki. "All right," he said, feeling more awake. "What's on the agenda for today?" Kiki finished smoothing out her skirt and gave him a wink. "Well, you've got a meeting with Asmodeus in a couple of hours about the expansion of the entertainment district. He's been talking about making lust more interactive for visiting demons, if you catch my drift." ISSEI nodded, sipping his coffee. "Figures. Anything else?" Kiki tapped her chin, thinking. "Let's see, Verasika's got her new song recording, but that's more on her schedule. As for you, after the meeting, you've got a few potential new businesses to check out and some investments to review, and later tonight, Asmodeus is throwing a party. He wants you there," ISSEI groaned internally. Another party. Being the Lust Ring's dragon sinner had its perks, sure, but the endless parties and social gatherings could be exhausting. "Great," he said with a small sigh. "Another chance to be paraded around." Kiki chuckled, walking over and placing a hand on his arm. "You're a star down here, babe. Everyone wants a piece of you." ISSEI smirked despite himself. Yeah? I guess I'd better get ready for all that then." He gulped down the last of his coffee, knowing full well that the day ahead would be just another in the endless swirl of lust's chaos. But at least he had his crew, Kiki, Verasika, and even Asmodeus, keeping things interesting. As ISSEI sipped his coffee, his thoughts drifted back to his first night in the Lust Ring. Back then, he was a far cry from the confident figure he had become. He was lost, confused, and more than a little scared. Lust wasn't just another ring of hell, it was a world of overwhelming sensations, desires, and temptations, and ISSEI had no idea how to navigate it. It was then that Asmodeus had come to him. The sin of lust wasn't what ISSEI expected at all. Sure, Asmodeus was elegant and suave, the embodiment of everything lust stood for, but there was something deeper there. He wasn't just some hedonistic overlord looking to indulge in endless pleasures. No, Asmodeus had an understanding of lust that was almost artistic, a philosophy that intrigued ISSEI from the start. That night Asmodeus had approached him, sensing his uncertainty. He introduced himself with a warm smile, offering not just power but a hand of guidance. ISSEI had been wary at first, unsure of what this sin could want from him. But Asmodeus, ever the charmer, invited ISSEI to his home to talk, sensing the boy's reluctance. It was there, in the lavish home of Lust's ruler, that Asmodeus explained his interest in ISSEI. The sin revealed that, in many ways, they were similar. Both of them had a deep, natural understanding of what lust truly was, something more than just raw desire or carnal pleasure. Asmodeus confessed that part of his reason for wanting ISSEI was his envy. He had always wanted a child to pass down his knowledge and understanding of lust, especially after hearing Lucifer constantly brag about his daughter, Charlie, when she was young. But unlike Lucifer, who had a more traditional air, Asmodeus didn't want just any child. He wanted someone who would truly appreciate lust, not just as a tool of corruption but as an art form, a force to be harnessed with respect and consent. ISSEI had been surprised at how much this resonated with him. After all, in his old life, people had constantly misunderstood him, assuming he was just some lust-driven pervert with no thought for the feelings of others. Sure, he'd made plenty of mistakes, and he cringed at the memory of some of his actions, but deep down, he always wanted more than just physical attraction. He wanted love and lust intertwined, with both sides willing and enthusiastic. Asmodeus had seen that in him. After their conversation, Asmodeus personally introduced ISSEI to the lust ring, making sure he adjusted smoothly to his new life. It was overwhelming at first, but having someone like Asmodeus backing him up gave ISSEI a sense of security. It was during this time that he met Verasika. When he first saw her, she was performing on stage, her voice sultry and powerful as she sang to the adoring crowd. There was something magnetic about her presence but also something vulnerable just beneath the surface. ISSEI could tell right away that she wasn't just some celebrity who basked in the attention. She had been hurt deeply by someone she trusted and loved, and that pain radiated through her music. He understood that all too well. In his old life, ISSEI had faced rejection time and again, mostly because of his reputation. Women didn't take him seriously, viewing him as nothing more than a joke, and he knew that some of it was his own doing. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Like Verasika, ISSEI had been scarred by his past, and over time, the two of them found solace in one another. Their friendship blossomed quickly, both of them offering the other a kind of healing they hadn't expected to find in the lust ring. Verasika saw past ISSEI's insecurities, and ISSEI, in turn, helped her see that not all men were selfish or manipulative. He was patient, caring, and respectful, qualities that Verasika hadn't experienced in a long time. Their friendship eventually grew into love. ISSEI still remembered the night Verasika discovered his old dream of having a harem, a dream he used to joke about back when he was alive. She had been amused, of course, teasing him about how he'd handle a group of women. Her reaction had made ISSEI laugh nervously, but his answer had been sincere. He wanted real connections, ones built on mutual love, trust, and of course, consent. He wanted his relationships to be about more than just lust. They needed to be meaningful. That night, Verasika had taken his words to heart. Flashback. It had been one of those nights after Verasika's performance, the kind where the energy in the lust ring still hummed around them, even in the quiet of her bedroom. ISSEI lay beside her, staring up at the ceiling, feeling the warmth of her body nestled against his side. Her head rested on his chest, and the rhythm of her breathing matched the slow beat of his heart. She'd been teasing him earlier, making light of the flustered way he had cheered for her during her concert. But as the conversation shifted to more personal matters, they began sharing stories of their pasts. It was during that moment of vulnerability that ISSEI had let it slip. "I had this dream back when I was alive," ISSEI had said, his voice a mix of nervousness and nostalgia. "I wanted a harem." Verasika had stopped tracing her fingers across his chest for a moment, tilting her head up to look at him with a raised eyebrow and a smirk. A harem, huh? Do girls surround you? All of them vying for your attention? Her teasing tone made him laugh, but he knew where this was headed. His face turned a shade of red as he tried to explain. It wasn't like that, he said quickly. I mean, sure, yeah, it sounds pervy when I say it like that, but I didn't just want to sleep around. I wanted something real. Veronica's smirk softened a little, curiosity replacing the playful gleam in her eyes. Real? What do you mean, ISSEI? He took a deep breath, trying to put his feelings into words. I always thought if I ever had a harem, it wouldn't just be about. It'd be about love, too. Real connection, Everyone would be in it because they wanted to be, not because they were forced or tricked. I wanted it to be mutual. Veronica remained quiet, her fingers resuming their slow, comforting strokes across his skin. ISSEI could feel her considering his words, the air between them growing more serious. And how would you treat these girls then? She asked suddenly, her tone dropping into something lower, more intimate. If you had this harem, how would you balance love and lust, ISSEI? ISSEI blinked, caught off guard by the directness of her question. His face flushed a deeper red as he stammered, trying to form an answer. Well, I'd make sure they were all happy, Not just in the obvious ways but in caring for them. Treat them with respect. Make sure they feel loved. And, show them how much I cared in all the right ways. He gave her a nervous chuckle, unsure if he sounded stupid or sincere. But to his surprise, Veronica's eyes gleamed with something new. Something predatory. I like that, she murmured, her lips curling into a wicked smile as she slid up his body, her face hovering just inches from his. I like a man who knows how to treat a woman right. ISSEI's breath itched as she leaned closer, her warm breath tickling his ear. Before he could respond, Veronica whispered, her voice dripping with both affection and lust. How about you stop dreaming and let me show you what it's like to really live? Lemon scene. Veronica then cupped his cheeks and captured his lips as she started ing him passionately, making ISSEI widen his eyes briefly in surprise before his eyes then closed and Ed back while wrapping his muscled arms around Veronica's waist, holding the succubus close as they pressed their bodies against each other. They slowly exchanging their yes as passion and slow lust slowly building up inside their core, with her start letting a soft moan that was mixed with a low groan. They then opened their mouth and let their tongues out, starting exchanging and wrestling, leading slow hot make-out. The two continued ing and making out with their bodies heating until Veronica broke the make-out session, leaving a string of saliva stuck on their lips while panting heavily, letting some steam out as they stared at each other in passion and lust. Not bad, just need few practices in ing, but overall I liked it, Veronica said sultry, making ISSEI smile slightly bashful before he then watched as Veronica slowly and seductively slid down from his body until she got off him and sat on her knees as she then goes to grab her cloth and start shaking her hips sensually slow, leaving ISSEI in a trance as succubus soon throws her clothes one by one until eventually it revealed something that made ISSEI feel his throat went dry and sudden strong hunger desire as he stared at Veronica's nude form. Veronica sports the body of a model, a perfect curvy yet voluptuous body with a slim waist and wide curvy hips, a voluminous-sized heart-shaped ass cheeks, an unusual bigger G-cup S smooth in her groin area with slight drooling puffy red, thick thighs, and flat tummy. Seeing the look on ISSEI's made Veronica giggle at his cute reaction and smirk sensually. Do you like what do you see? Tell me, am I desirable? Veronica said before asking coyly, causing ISSEI not to trust his word and nod, making the singer succubus hum and please before she got close and grabbed his shirt before suddenly she shredded the shirt apart, catching ISSEI off guard while Veronica purred as she trailed her finger at his outlined muscles of strong fighter, perfect chiseled muscled chest, and visible 8-pack toned abs that made Veronica feel the desire to eat ISSEI so much. She then leaned on ISSEI and pressed her jiggly, squishy, and soft S against his chest, making ISSEI feel a sudden shudder of having actual contact with the flesh of Milky S pressing against him for the first time. He starts groaning in bliss as the succubus starts teasingly rubbing her wet against the pitch tent, damping the pants in the process, and feeling the hardness behind the coffin cloth pants, exciting Veronica further. Someone is so exciting I can feel your little friend twitching and want to come out, the succubus said sultry, making ISSEI groan before she slowly trails down while starting leaving a trail of ES on his body behind until she reached to his pants and grabbed before goes to pull down. Smack! Veronica suddenly hitched her breath as her pupils dilated heavily in shock, awe, disbelief, and intensely lustful as something very huge and meaty smacked against her face with strong, heavy masculine musk. How do you hide this?" Verosika asked in between the until he groaned his response. "Lemon has been removed due to YouTube policy. If you to know what happened, read the fanfiction from link." And just like that, the night had changed. ISSEI wasn't sure what he'd expected, but what Verosika gave him was something beyond his wildest fantasies. She was passionate, yes, but there was something more. It wasn't just about lust or desire. She'd taken his V card with an intimacy that went beyond the physical, showing him how love and lust could intertwine in ways he hadn't fully understood before. He could still hear her words from that night echoing in his mind, "I love you, ISSEI. Don't you forget it?" ISSEI had been stunned, his heart pounding as he held her close afterward. It wasn't just the physical connection that had left him breathless. It was the realization that for the first time in his life, he had found someone who truly saw him for who he was, not just as a lust-driven boy, but as someone deserving of love and respect. And Flashback. ISSEI smiled at the memory, finishing the last of his coffee. He turned to Kiki, who was now fully dressed and waiting for him. "All right," he said, feeling ready to tackle the day. "Let's get this show on the road." "Gladly," Kiki said before stopping as if she remembered something. "Oh, and a letter came in the mail to you. Apparently it's from your secret admirer." ISSEI groaned, knowing who it was before Kiki left ISSEI to read it while he was getting changed, since magic was very helpful when it came to getting ready for business. ISSEI groaned loudly, already knowing who it was without even glancing at the letter. His head fell into his hands. Why does she keep doing this?" Kiki chuckled softly, leaving ISSEI to deal with the letter as he moved to get changed. With a flick of his wrist, a subtle glow surrounded him as his clothes shifted and transformed, an enchantment that made getting ready for business much easier. The letter sat on his desk, mocking him with its overly ornate, perfumed envelope. The paper shimmered in a way only celestial materials did, and he didn't need to open it to know who had sent it. He'd been dealing with this for months now, ever since that incident. "Freakin' danger tits," he muttered under his breath, recalling the ridiculous nickname she used in all her letters. Loot, a damn exorcist from heaven of all places. The same woman who had slaughtered not just him but also Matsuda, Motohama, and Aika back when they were humans, her divine weapon cutting through them like paper. And now, somehow, she was sending him love letters. As if that made up for the whole murdered me and my friends thing. It had all started after Lucifer, in one of his infamous moments of whimsy, had roped Asmodeus into pulling a prank on her. ISSEI had been the centerpiece, of course, tasked with putting on a seductive show for loot. Lucifer, apparently, found the idea of messing with an exorcist's heart, one so rigid in her celestial duty, absolutely hilarious. And Asmodeus, never one to pass up a chance to amuse Lucifer or see someone squirm, had gladly complied. ISSEI remembered it vividly. He'd perform of a lifetime, winking and teasing in a way that would make even the most hardened of souls blush. And oh, did she blush! Loot, who always carried herself like a stone-cold killer, had faltered. As ISSEI continued to prepare for the day, his mind drifted back to the avalanche of love letters and gifts that had poured in from Loot after that infamous performance. It had started innocently enough. The first letter had arrived the very next day, folded neatly and adorned with a gold seal that bore her mark. ISSEI had opened it, expecting a reprimand or a sarcastic remark. Instead, he was met with an awkwardly heartfelt confession that left him staring blankly for a solid minute. "Dear ISSEI," it had begun, the elegance of her handwriting almost a stark contrast to the chaotic emotions inside. "I must confess, your performance was distracting. I've never felt so flustered while on duty before. Perhaps I need some time to reflect on my feelings." He had laughed incredulously at first, thinking it was some prank. But no, this was real. Loot's confessions became progressively more intense, filled with a mixture of desire and bewilderment at her feelings. With each letter, she seemed to struggle more with her emotions, like a celestial being caught in a whirlwind of earthly lust. After the letters came the gifts. A delicate locket engraved with a dragon motif appeared on his doorstep one morning, alongside another letter explaining how it represented protection and strength. A week later, he received a beautifully crafted dagger, its blade shimmering with an otherworldly glow. It was both a reminder of the threats he faced and an odd symbol of her affection. "For when the demons come to take your life again," she had written, "I won't always be there to save you, but this will keep you safe until I can." ISSEI had chuckled at that one, thinking how ironic it was that the same woman who once sought to end his life was now trying to keep him alive. It was a whirlwind of confusion, but as her letters grew more passionate, he found himself bemusedly entertained. But the crowning moment had been the day he received a bloody message left painted across the streets of lust. A message made to look like it was scrawled in blood. "I'd die for you, ISSEI. Join me in my holy mission, and I'll show you the pleasures of the light." That had caused quite a stir in the lust ring, with everyone talking about the mysterious love letter from the Exorcist. Even Asmodeus had found it hysterical, cackling about how a holy warrior had become a lovesick puppy, infatuated with the dragon sinner. ISSEI couldn't deny that part of him felt flattered, if not a bit intrigued by her tenacity. But there was also a deeper, darker feeling, anxiety. How long would this last? Would she ever actually come to confront him? And if she did, how would he even react? The sound of Kiki's voice broke him from his reverie. "Are you going to read it or just stare at it all day?" he sighed, reluctantly reaching for the envelope. "I guess I have to face the music eventually." With a deep breath, he tore it open, scanning the elegantly penned lines of what had become a familiar confession. "Dear ISSEI, it began. I hope this letter finds you well. I've been thinking a lot about our last encounter. It has opened my eyes to what I truly want. I've spoken to Adam and Michael, and they suggested I should pursue my feelings further. Perhaps you could give me a chance? After all, I believe we could be an unstoppable force together. Imagine the chaos we could unleash." A small laugh escaped him as he continued reading. The absurdity of it all was both amusing and unsettling. He could picture her earnest face, trying to reconcile her duties as an exorcist with the feelings she clearly couldn't suppress. "I know I have a complicated history with you and your friends. But please, allow me to show you a side of me you've never seen. Let's meet again, ISSEI. I promise to be on my best behavior. Love, your secret admirer, Danger Tits." "Danger Tits?" ISSEI muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "What kind of name is that?" He chuckled to himself, feeling an odd mix of exasperation and intrigue. After folding the letter back into its envelope, he set it aside. "I guess I have to figure out what to do about this." Kiki watched him, a knowing smile on her face. "So, what are you going to do about your admirer?" ISSEI shrugged, trying to dismiss the weight of the situation. "I don't know. Maybe I'll ignore it and hope she gets the hint." Kiki raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "You really think that will work?" "She sounds pretty persistent." ISSEI sighed again, glancing at the letter. "You have no idea. She's like a bad penny, she keeps turning up." "Well," Kiki said, grinning, "if nothing else, it'll be an entertaining day." "Ready to get to work?" "Yeah," he said, forcing a smile, his thoughts lingering on Lute's unexpected affection. "Let's see what trouble we can get into today." With that, they left the room, ISSEI's mind still buzzing with thoughts of the exorcist who had turned his world upside down and sent a whirlwind of feelings swirling around him. One thing was for sure, life in hell would be anything but ordinary, and strangely, he liked it that way. Then again, that was the life of a sin's disciple. When people think of the child of Lucifer Morningstar, they imagine a figure cloaked in menace, a being who thrives on bloodlust and chaos, reveling in the suffering of sinners, a ruthless enforcer of hell's cruelty, relishing every scream that echoed in the infernal depths. That's what they expect, and that's why Charlie Morningstar often found herself at odds with her destiny. Born as the daughter of the devil himself, Charlie carried the weight of countless assumptions and centuries of expectation. Yes, she had her father's piercing gaze and the aura of raw power that could silence a room. But where Lucifer's presence inspired fear, Charlie dreamed of inspiring hope. Her goal wasn't to punish sinners but to redeem them. Hell, to her, was a broken system. A place where lost souls wandered endlessly, consumed by their regrets, with no chance of escape. She believed there had to be a better way, a chance for redemption, even for those damned to hell. Standing on the balcony of the Happy Hotel, Charlie glanced out over the glowing rivers of fire that carved through the underworld. Somewhere beyond those rivers were the countless souls she wanted to save. "You can't fix hell, Charlie." Her father's voice echoed in her mind, a deep, mocking tone that haunted her. "It's not broken, it's perfect. It's exactly as it should be." Charlie clenched her fists. No. She refused to believe that. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hesitant footsteps behind her. She turned to see Vaggie, her closest confidant, looking at her with a mix of worry and encouragement. "Still thinking about your plan?" Vaggie asked, folding her arms. Charlie sighed. "I can't stop. I know it sounds wild, trying to help sinners in a place designed to punish them, but I have to try. Someone has to. It's not crazy, Vaggie replied. It's just ambitious. You know what your dad will say. Charlie's golden eyes softened, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. She knew exactly what Lucifer would say. He'd laugh, dismiss her efforts as naive, and tell her to stop wasting her time. But Charlie couldn't ignore the longing in her heart. The thought of leaving even one soul better than she'd found it gave her purpose. I don't care what he says, Charlie said firmly, determination burning in her voice. I have to believe that sinners can change, that they deserve to change. If I don't, then what's the point of anything? Vaggie sighed, her expression softening. You're too good for this place, Charlie. Too good for this world. Maybe, Charlie replied with a small, bittersweet smile. But that's why I have to fight for it. As she looked back at the infernal landscape, her heart was set. No matter how impossible her dreams seemed, Charlie Morningstar was determined to bring light to the darkest corners of hell. And hopefully, my cousins will help me out, Charlie said in anticipation. She had sent out invitations to the Sin's disciples, hoping they would come to Pride and help her with the Happy Hotel. The 4 of them had great skills, and when she heard what happened to them during the extermination, it made her want to help them more. However, it was a bit tricky since her relationship with her cousins wasn't great, to say the least. Charlie let out a long breath, clutching the gilded railing of the balcony as she thought about her cousins. Their reactions to her invitation were as varied as their personalities, and none of them seemed entirely aligned with her vision. Still, she held on to a sliver of hope. If even one of them came around, it might make all the difference. Ika Kiryu, fierce and unrelenting, was the hardest to reach. Charlie couldn't blame her for the bitterness she carried. Hell had a way of grinding down its inhabitants, especially those with a strong moral compass. Ika's disdain for sinners wasn't born from cruelty. It came from a place of frustration. She'd seen the worst of what hell had to offer and had little patience for the idea of redemption. Charlie frowned, remembering their last conversation. Ika's parting words had stung. Not all fires can be put out, Charlie. Some things are just meant to burn. Still, Charlie couldn't shake the belief that even Ika might someday see the value in her mission. Motohama, on the other hand, was less abrasive but no less doubtful. His sharp business sense clashed with Charlie's idealism. To him, the Happy Hotel was a sinking ship before it even set sail. Show me some numbers, some results, Motohama said, adjusting his glasses with a smug smirk. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels. Charlie hated to admit it, but his skepticism had planted a seed of doubt. What if he was right? What if she was chasing an impossible dream? But even as the fear crept in, she reminded herself, every great change starts with one small act of faith. Matsuda, at least, had been kinder. His easygoing nature made him a rare source of comfort, even if he didn't fully believe in her plan. Charlie appreciated his support, even when it was tempered with brutal honesty. But his girlfriend, Sally Mae, was a tougher nut to crack. The imp's sharp tongue and no-nonsense attitude often left Charlie feeling like a child playing dress-up. She hated the way Sally's words cut through her confidence, but deep down, she knew they weren't entirely wrong. Then there was ISSEI. Sweet, conflicted ISSEI. He was the most likely to support her, but even he was tethered by his loyalties. Charlie had seen the tenderness in his eyes when he spoke about Asmodeus and his unconventional family. They were his anchor in a world that often seemed ready to swallow him whole. But Charlie couldn't give up on him. If anyone understood the value of connection and second chances, it was ISSEI. His empathy was his greatest strength, and she couldn't help but hope he'd lend it to her cause. Do you really think they'll come? Vaggie's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She hadn't realized her friend had stepped closer, her expression laced with concern. I don't know, Charlie admitted. But I have to try. If I can show them what this place can be, what we can be, maybe they'll believe in it too. Vaggie sighed, crossing her arms. Even Ika? Charlie smiled faintly. Even Ika. She's tough, but she's not heartless. None of them are. They need to see that change is possible, and if they don't? Vaggie pressed. Charlie's gaze drifted back to the fiery rivers below. Then I'll keep going. Even if I have to do it alone. Vaggie shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. You're never alone, Charlie. You've got me, and the others. We'll figure this out together. Charlie reached out, squeezing Vaggie's hand. Thank you. As the two stood in quiet solidarity, Charlie felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whether her cousins came around or not, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to give up, not on her dream, not on Heland, not on them. The sharp knock at the door echoed through the quiet lobby of the Happy Hotel, interrupting the serene moment between Charlie and Vaggie. Charlie's heart leapt. See, could it be? Charlie said, and without a second thought, she dashed to the door, her heels clicking against the polished floor. They came! She whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and nerves. Maybe, Vaggie replied cautiously, trailing after her. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Charlie barely heard her, throwing the door open with a bright, hopeful smile. Standing on the threshold were her 4 cousins, each one radiating a different kind of energy. Charlie! ISSEI greeted warmly, his face lighting up with genuine happiness as he pulled her into a bear hug. His dragon-like tail wagged slightly behind him, a clear sign of his enthusiasm. It's so good to see you, Matsuda! Charlie exclaimed as she hugged ISSEI back. Hey, Charlie! Matsuda chimed in, giving her a playful pat on the head. His mischievous grin was infectious as he added, You've been busy, huh? The place looks, well, let's say charming. Motohama slithered in next, his snake-like tail trailing behind him. He adjusted his glasses, his eyes scanning the hotel's lobby with a critical gleam. Well, this is quaint. It's definitely a fixer-upper. I'll give you points for trying, Charlie. His smirk was a mix of amusement and skepticism. Charlie forced herself to keep smiling, determined not to let his words deflate her. Thanks for coming, Motohama. It means a lot. Aika followed behind them, her attention glued to her phone as her thumbs danced across the screen. She looked up briefly, giving Charlie a small smile. Hey, Charlie, she said casually before returning to her conversation. One SEC got a reply to this. Charlie's smile faltered just a little, but she quickly recovered. It's great to see you all, she said, stepping aside to let them in. Come on in. Make yourselves at home. The group filed in, each one taking in the lobby in their way. ISSEI and Matsuda admired the decorations, offering enthusiastic comments about the quirky charm of the place. Motohama slithered around, poking at the furniture and muttering about the outdated design. Aika lingered near the entrance, still texting. Charlie hesitated, glancing at her with a mix of hope and worry. Aika, I'm really glad you came. Aika glanced up, her sharp green eyes meeting Charlie's golden ones. Yeah, well, I figured I'd check it out, she said with a shrug. Don't get too excited, though. I'm not signing up for any come by a circle just yet, Charlie chuckled nervously. Fair enough. Besides, Aika added, smirking slightly as she pocketed her phone, I wanted to see my friends again since we hardly get to meet up since we actually do some work and have a life. So, at least here, I can take a break, chat with my friends, and watch you struggle to make this place work. It should be entertaining. Charlie laughed awkwardly, unsure whether to take that as encouragement or sarcasm. Either way, Aika was here, and that was enough for now. So ISSEI began, clapping his hands together as he looked around. Where do we start? Got any big plans for this place? Charlie's eyes lit up as she launched into her vision of the Happy Hotel, her voice brimming with passion. Despite their differing attitudes, her cousins listened, some with genuine interest, others with varying degrees of skepticism. It wasn't perfect, but for Charlie it was a start. And that was all she needed. Charlie's enthusiasm shone as she stepped toward the center of the lobby, gesturing for her cousins to gather around. Okay, everyone. I've been working on this for so long, and I can't wait to show you all the plans for the Happy Hotel. Matsuda raised a hand, cutting her off with an apologetic grin. Hold up, Charlie. Before you get too ahead of yourself, we need to clear the air about something. Charlie blinked, her excitement faltering. What do you mean? The 4 cousins exchanged glances, and ISSEI stepped forward, his expression gentle but serious. We talked about this before we came here, Charlie. We all want to help you, but well, we need to know this idea of yours isn't just a pipe dream. Motohama slithered closer, his arms crossed as he leaned against a crooked pillar. Yeah, look, I think we can all agree this place has potential, if potential means desperately in need of a miracle. He gestured vaguely to the peeling wallpaper and creaky floors. But potential doesn't pay the bills, Charlie. If you want our help, you're going to need to prove this isn't just some royal daydream. Charlie's golden eyes widened. But I can prove it. You'll see. Let us finish, Aika interrupted, her voice sharp as she glanced up from her phone. We're not saying no, okay? We're saying we've got conditions. You meet them, we'll help. Simple as that. Charlie tilted her head, her heart pounding. What kind of conditions? Matsuda stepped forward, his usual playful tone tempered with sincerity. We each came up with one condition for you to fulfill. It's like a test, you know? If you pass all 4, we'll back your project, no questions asked. But if you don't, he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Charlie's throat tightened. What are the conditions? Motohama raised a finger. First, you need a sponsor. Someone who can help fund this operation and, more importantly, clean up this infestation you're calling a hotel. If this place isn't up to standard, no one's gonna take you seriously. Matsuda stepped in next. Second, I want to see an actual plan, something concrete, for how you're going to help sinners get into heaven. No fluff, no vague dreams. A step-by-step process. Aika crossed her arms, her gaze cool but assessing. Third, I want to see at least one sinner stay here. Not because they're bribed or blackmailed, but because they actually want to be here. No freeloading either, they have to meet the conditions of the hotel. Charlie nodded slowly, her mind racing as she absorbed their demands. Okay, and the last one? ISSEI stepped forward, his expression kind but firm. Last, I want proof that it's even possible for a sinner to be redeemed and accepted into heaven. Not just stories or theories, Charlie. Actual proof. The weight of their words settled over Charlie like a storm cloud. Each condition felt like a towering obstacle, but she couldn't let them see her doubt. She squared her shoulders, determination blazing in her eyes. I'll do it. Whatever it takes. I'll prove to you that this can work. Motohama smirked, snapping his fingers as a scroll of parchment appeared in his hand. Great. Then let's make it official. With a flourish, he unfurled the contract, the ornate text glowing faintly in the dim light. You have until the end of next year. If you can meet all 4 conditions, then we will help you. Do we have a deal? Charlie hesitated for only a moment before taking the offered pen and signing her name at the bottom. The parchment glowed brightly, then rolled itself up and vanished in a puff of smoke. Perfect, Motohama said, his grin widening. Now the clock's ticking, Charlie. Let's see what you've got. As the reality of the deal sank in, Vaggie, who had been quietly watching from the sidelines, stepped forward, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. What the hell, Charlie? You're just going to let them dictate terms like that? This hotel is your dream, not theirs. I know, Vaggie, Charlie said, her voice soft but resolute. But I need their help. I can't do this alone. Vaggie threw up her hands. You're playing with fire, literal fire. You have no idea how hard it'll be to meet their demands. Charlie reached out, placing a hand on Vaggie's shoulder. I do. And that's why I need you too. I can't think of anyone better to help me prove them wrong. Vaggie sighed, her frustration melting into reluctant loyalty. Fine. But if they start messing with you, I'm stepping in. Deal, Charlie said with a small, grateful smile. She turned back to her cousins, her determination unwavering. You wanted conditions? Fine. I'll meet them. And when I do, you'll see that this dream is worth fighting for. ISSEI tilted his head as he watched the exchange between Charlie and Vaggie, his curiosity getting the better of him. Wait a second, Charlie. Who's this? He gestured toward Vaggie with a questioning look. Charlie's face lit up, a soft blush tinting her cheeks as she turned to Vaggie. Oh, right. I should introduce you. Everyone, this is Vaggie, my girlfriend. The room went quiet for a moment before ISSEI broke into a wide grin. No way. That's awesome, Charlie. He stepped forward and clasped her hands. Congrats. And Vaggie, huh? You seem like you can keep Charlie in line. Nice to meet you. Matsuda let out a low whistle, clapping his cousin on the back. Wow, Charlie. It is a major step up from your last relationship. I mean, seriously, way up. No offense to what was her name again? Veronica? Vanessa? Vanessa, Charlie said sheepishly, glancing at Vaggie, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Yeah, her. Matsuda laughed. Well, anyway, good for you. Vaggie, huh? You've got a great one here, so you'd better treat her right. Motohama leaned against a nearby pillar, his arms crossed and a smirk on his face. Well, well, well. Look at you, Charlie. Didn't think you had it in you to land someone like Vaggie? His tone was teasing, but his sharp eyes narrowed slightly as he turned to Vaggie. But just so you know, if you so much as think about breaking her heart, you'll have to answer to me. And trust me, you don't want that. Ika, who had been scrolling through her phone, finally looked up. She studied Vaggie for a moment, then nodded approvingly. You've got a good head on your shoulders, from what I can see. Charlie deserves someone like that. She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. But if you hurt her, I'll make sure you regret it. Got it? Vaggie crossed her arms, her usual sharp demeanor returning as she glared back at the group. I'm not going to hurt Charlie, she said firmly, her voice steady and unwavering. I care about her more than anything. Good, Ika said, returning her attention to her phone. ISSEI grinned, his dragon-like tail swishing slightly. Hey, no need to gang up on her. Vaggie seemed solid. But just for the record, if you do hurt Charlie, you'd better start praying because all four of us will make your life hell. No pun intended, Vaggie sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Got it. Message received loud and clear. Charlie laughed nervously, stepping between Vaggie and her cousins. Okay, that's enough. Vaggie's not going to hurt me, and I think she's officially had enough of the Morningstar Welcome Committee. Vaggie smirked slightly, glancing at Charlie. I'll survive. But your cousins are intense. Charlie smiled warmly, reaching out to squeeze Vaggie's hand. They mean well. They want to make sure I'm happy, and we'll make sure of that, Matsuda added with a grin, wrapping an arm around Charlie's shoulders. But seriously, congrats, cuz. You've got good taste. Charlie's heart swelled with warmth as she looked around at her cousins and Vaggie. It wasn't perfect, and they had a long way to go, but for the first time in a while, she felt like she wasn't alone in this. Together, they might stand a chance. Given Charlie's interactions with her cousins, one would think that besides Vaggie, Razzle, and Dazzle, no one else is there to help her. However, that isn't really true since there is a fifth disciple who's in hell. He isn't a very active disciple since they reside in the Sloth Ring, and he is the son of Belphegor, the sin of sloth. His name was Walker Shanks. He was an exchange student from the USA at Ko Academy. His parents were in the US Navy and were stationed in Japan. Walker was highly intelligent but very lazy. Worse, he made his very important decisions based on the outcome of flipping his lucky US silver piece dollar coin. He's also a bit perverted, though not as much as the trio and Ika, to say the least. However, Walker's sins, his indolence and constant wasting of potential, resulted in his death by the Exorcists. Walker's sinner form was that of an anthro-lion. It reminded Charlie of an Earth movie she saw with a lion as the main villain, which amused her since male lions are rather lazy and let the lionesses do all the hard work. The animal also represents the sin of pride. Well, it's nice to know they want to help, but I'll need to get some help if I want to meet their requirements, so it's time to go put out some flyers, Charlie said with excitement, while Vaggie was helping her girlfriend. Don't you think we should wake up your cousin since he's been asleep almost all morning? Vaggie said while checking the grandfather clock to see that it was almost 11. Oh, that's just Walker's personality. He sleeps almost as much as my Aunt Belphegor, and since his girlfriend is here working as a maid, she also helps get him out of bed and makes sure he eats, Charlie said while chuckling. Her cousin came to help her since their relationship was a bit rocky. Walker loves her, but he thinks that sometimes she is too idealistic and naive, much like Motohama. However, when Charlie asks Walker to help with her redemption, he thinks her idea is naive and recalls that day she got her cousin to help her with the Happy Hotel. Flashback. Charlie glanced at Walker, who was sprawled across the armchair, one leg hanging lazily over the side. His mane-like hair was as wild as ever, framing his sharp lion-like features, though his half-lidded eyes betrayed his disinterest in the conversation. She took a deep breath before speaking. Walker, I need your help with the hotel. Your support could mean a lot to me. Please. At her words, Walker opened one eye and stared at her for a long moment before sighing. You know, this whole redemption thing of yours sounds nice in theory, he began, his voice low and slow, like someone perpetually on the verge of a nap. But it's also naive. Like really naive. Do you think you can change hell with smiles and catchy jingles? Hell doesn't work like that. Charlie hesitated, his words stinging more than she cared to admit. I know it's not easy, Walker. But if we don't try, he interrupted her, sitting up slightly and flicking his lucky silver coin into the air. You want to know what I think? Fine. Here's what I think. Suddenly, Charlie's mind flashed back to the first time she had asked him for his help months ago. She remembered how he had leaned back in his chair, flipping his coin idly as he gave her a cold, cynical lecture. One man is born a hero, his brother a coward, Walker had said, his voice mocking as the coin flipped again and again between his fingers. Babies starve, politicians grow fat. Holy men are martyred, and junkies grow legion. Why? Why? He had let the coin land in his palm and slapped it onto the back of his other hand before finishing with a flourish. Luck. Blind, stupid, simple, doodah, clueless luck. Charlie had stared at him in shock, her heart sinking as he leaned forward and pinned her with his intense golden gaze. You're trying to impose meaning on a world that runs on chaos. Do you think you can fight the system? The same system that spat me out and sent me straight to hell because I wasted my potential? No, the only morality in this cruel world, cuz, is chance. And that's why I let this little beauty make my decisions. He had flipped the coin again, letting it spin in the air before catching it. This will be my call and your chance. Heads, I help you. Tails, I don't. Charlie had watched with bated breath as the coin soared through the air and hit the ground tiles only to land on its edge, wobbling briefly before settling upright. Both of them had stared at the improbable result, the room deathly silent. Walker had blinked at the coin, dumbfounded. Well, that's a first, he muttered. So does that mean you'll decide for yourself? Charlie had asked cautiously. Walker sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. Looks like I have to. Stupid coin. He paused, then added, reluctantly, all right, fine. I'll help. But only because you're family. And if this whole thing crashes and burns, don't say I didn't warn you. I'll make sure it never comes to that, Charlie said before hugging Walker. Thank you, Walker. Thank you? Ugh. No need to get sappy. This was just your lucky day, Walker said while patting his cousin's head. He was annoyed but okay with helping her with the hotel plans since he knew his sister would need all the help she could get to make this place work. And Flashback. And as long as I've known him, Walker has been helping me since then, Charlie said, while Vaggie crossed her arms and replied. He literally said he was going to take a nap around noon yesterday, and it's almost noon today. What work has he been doing exactly? Vaggie asked before a broom smacked Vaggie on the back of her head. Oh, be quiet, vagina. It's Vaggie! How hard is it to say that? Oh please, you still said your name was your vagina when you got drunk, so that's my new name for you. The bane of Vaggie's existence, Barbie Wire, said as she wore a maid uniform, shouldering her broom, and looked around for the disciple. Speaking of names, where's that fat lion sleeping now? He should have been up by now since his 12-hour nap, Barbie said while looking at the clock before Charlie replied. Oh, he's still asleep. Would you mind getting his lazy ass out of bed? Sure thing. I've got a PhD in waking up drunks, lazy asses, and even princesses, Barbie said with Charlie backing away since she recalled when Barbie woke her up that one time, and it was when Walker laughed so hard he almost died of a lack of air in his lungs due to him being thoroughly amused with Barbie waking up Charlie. Please don't ever do that again, Charlie said with Vaggie hoisting her spear while Barbie rolled her eyes. Oh, relax, I barely even touched you. You literally threw me into the fountain outside. Hey, you were smelly and needed a bath, while I had clothes on. Charlie screamed, her eye twitching a bit, which made Barbie smirk at her. Oops, Barbie said with a smirk as Charlie took a deep breath and relaxed. Just go wake him up, please. You got it, apple cheeks, Barbie said before Charlie yelled at Barbie, going up the stairs with an excited smile. And please don't break the door down. No promises, Barbie yelled back, making Charlie groan. She was trying to remember why she decided to have Barbie do her community service here at the hotel before recalling how her cousin and Barbie had grown close in the past couple of months. You starting to regret having her here? Vaggie asked before Charlie replied. As long as Walker keeps her under control, then it'll be fine. I hope, Charlie said as the two went to get a sponsor and help refurnish and tidy up the place. Meanwhile, with said disciple, the soft, dim glow of hell's eternal skies filtered through the window of Walker's room in the Hazbin Hotel as the anthropomorphic lion groaned as he stirred awake, his mane a messy tangle and his black shirt wrinkled from another night of tossing and turning. His room, as always, was a mix of controlled chaos, an unmade bed, scattered notes, and a single neat display of coins on the desk. Walker yawned, stretched his muscular arms, and scratched his mane, debating whether to get up or stay in bed. Another day in the inferno. Decisions, Walker said before he reached for his lucky silver piece dollar coin on the nightstand, preparing to flip it to decide his fate for the morning. Either get out of his bed or go back to sleep. Just as he was about to flip it, the door burst open with a loud bang. Barbie Wire barged in, her arms crossed and her signature scowl in full force. "Get up, you lazy fur ball. You've been in here all morning," Walker groaned as he moved his blanket to cover his head before replying to Barbie. "Morning? It's hell, Barbie. I'm pretty sure it's always night here. At least, that's my theory anyway." Barbie groaned at her stubborn boyfriend as she marched over and grabbed his blanket to pull it off him, but Walker held on to it with amazing grip strength. "Oh no. Don't start with me. I'm not in the mood for your coin-flipping nonsense. Get up now, or I'm dragging you out of this room." Walker grinned under the blanket as he replied to Barbie, knowing he could overpower the former circus imp. "You wouldn't dare." Barbie rolled her eyes as she snatched the blanket off him, thanks to a stroke of luck. She grabbed the coin mid-flip, and he tried to toss it to sleep some more. Barbie smirked at his shocked expression, while she waved the coin teasingly away from him and backed away from the bed. "Oh, look what I have! If you want it back, you're getting out of bed and getting some brunch." No negotiations. Walker knew he was stuck, so he decided to submit. He sighed dramatically and replied, "You drive a hard bargain, Warden." Barbie chuckled at this since it was their dynamic, with Barbie being his warden because she is the one who takes care of him and helps him be active. While Walker wasn't as lazy as his mother, he was pretty lazy at times since he wasn't a big fan of wasting time. However, he does take a lot of power naps when needing to recharge his battery. In fact, it was recorded that the longest he stayed up was for a concert that ISSEI performed in Lust with his girlfriend, Veronica. His cousin got him the best seat in the house of Asmodeus, which made Barbie see Walker's energetic side as he danced a bit and even sang. But that's a story for another time. With a tired yawn, Walker swung his legs over the bed and stood up. Before Barbie could revel in her victory, he suddenly pulled her into a lazy hug and flopped back onto the bed, dragging her down with him. She let out an oof as his weight pinned her. Barbie struggled as she yelled at him. "Walker! Get your fat ass off me!" Walker was grinning and feigning exhaustion before replying to her. "Sorry, but I'm too tired. I can't move without my coin." Barbie groaned at this before she tried glaring at him while trying to wiggle free, but he had an iron grip on her. "You're the worst. Fine, you can have it back, but only if you come down for breakfast. Deal?" Walker nodded as he let her do it while yawning. "Who's cooking?" Barbie rolled her eyes and replied. "I am." At the mention of Charlie's cooking, Walker immediately sat up, his ears perked in alarm. Walker knew if his cousin was cooking, it would be a disaster. "Charlie? Cooking? Not baking, right? Just cooking?" Barbie grinned before laughing at him and replied, "I'm just kidding. I'm the one who's cooking." "Ah, now things are a relief," Walker said as he rubbed his face. "You should have started with that. I was worried we had to hurry before Charlie tries to improve cereal or something." The two made their way down to the hotel's kitchen, where the faint, unmistakable smell of something delicious wafted through the air. Walker slowed his pace, glancing sideways at Barbie. Walker grinned at Barbie and said to her, "This might be one of the only times I'm actually glad you woke me up. If we hurry, we might save someone's stomach from Charlie's chemical warfare." Barbie smirked at this before giggling at him and replied, "See? I'm doing you a favor. Now stop whining and move it, lazy lion." Walker sighed, but there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. Despite the constant bickering, there was an underlying warmth between the two, a bond that came through even in moments like this. Barbie rolled her eyes at his relaxed pace and grabbed his wrist, dragging him the rest of the way to the kitchen. "She's a stubborn girl, and yet I find myself drawn to her since, for some reason, I can't help but be captivated by her beauty," Walker said in his mind while recalling their first meeting and his days in hell. Walker even recalled the day he died from the Exorcists while sleeping at the table waiting for Barbie to set breakfast down on the table. Flashback. The day began like any other for Walker Shanks. He had woken up late, flipped his coin to decide whether to leave the house or not, and, as always, let fate guide his choices. Heads, he'd go out. Tails, he'd stay in. Heads. With a lazy groan, Walker threw on his denim jacket, slid his coin into his pocket, and headed out into the streets of Kuo. His destination? A nearby ramen stand that he frequented whenever he couldn't be bothered to cook. The streets were unusually quiet, but Walker didn't think much of it. After all, Ko was known for its occasional strange occurrences. He ordered his usual and enjoyed the warm broth, savoring the moment. It wasn't until he was heading home, walking along a dimly lit alley, that he heard the commotion. Curious, Walker turned the corner and froze. In the middle of the street, he saw ISSEI, Motohama, Matsuda, and Aika, surrounded by exorcists clad in shining armor. Their weapons gleamed with divine light, and their voices carried the cold authority of judgment. Walker watched in horror as the exorcists struck them down, one by one, with merciless efficiency. Idiots, Walker muttered under his breath, his instincts screaming at him to leave. He turned to go, but fate had other plans. One of the exorcists spotted him. Another sinner! The exorcist shouted. Don't let him escape. Walker's heart raced as he bolted down the alley, his mind working frantically. He wasn't much for running, but adrenaline fueled his legs. Unfortunately, the exorcists were faster. Before he could make it to the main road, a sharp pain tore through his back. Walker stumbled and fell to the ground, coughing as blood pooled beneath him. The exorcist who had struck him stood over him, swords still glowing with divine energy. You are guilty of the sins of sloth and lust, the exorcist declared, his voice filled with righteous condemnation. You wasted the gifts God gave you, your intellect, your potential, all for your indolence. You deserve this. Walker gritted his teeth, his vision blurring. Despite the pain, he managed a weak laugh. Justice, huh? You think this is justice? The exorcist frowned. You dare mock divine judgment? Walker's breathing grew shallow, but his defiance remained. Justice is random. Blind. Like a coin flip. He weakly pulled out his silver piece dollar coin, holding it up for the exorcist to see. You want to see true justice? Let's see what chance has to say about your so-called righteousness. With the last of his strength, Walker flipped the coin into the air. The exorcist watched it fall, landing on tails. Walker chuckled weakly, his voice fading. Tails, looks like your justice is gonna get what it deserves someday. And with that, Walker's vision went black. Walker's first sensation was the faint, oppressive heat. His second was the sound of soft, mocking laughter. He opened his eyes to find himself lying on the cracked, molten ground beneath a blood-red sky. Standing over him was a tall, regal figure with sharp, angular features and piercing red eyes. Lucifer Morningstar. Well, well, Lucifer said, his voice smooth as silk. Another lost soul joins our little party. Welcome to hell, Walker Shanks. Walker blinked, his hands instinctively going to his sides. He felt fur, thick, coarse fur. His body was different and larger, with feline features. He glanced at his reflection in a pool of molten glass nearby and saw a lion-like sinner staring back at him. What the? Walker muttered, his voice a deep, gravelly growl. His hands clenched, feeling the familiar weight of his silver coin in his palm. He turned it over. It still showed tails. Lucifer smirked. Quite the fitting form, wouldn't you say? A lion, lazy yet intelligent, powerful yet indifferent. And that coin of yours? Let's say fate has a sense of humor. Walker looked up at Lucifer. So, what now? The Prince of Pride chuckled. You'll thrive here in hell. Your slothful nature will be an asset, not a hindrance. I think you'll find yourself quite at home in the sloth ring. Lucifer's smile grew. I.W. Walker Shanks, the lazy intellectual. And don't worry, Belphegor will take good care of you. She has a fondness for her kin. Before Walker could respond, a portal opened beneath him, pulling him into the sloth ring. The sloth ring was a serene, endless expanse of comfort and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the upper rings. Walker landed in a cushioned pit, his body sinking into its softness. A soft, soothing voice greeted him. So, you're the one Lucifer sent, Belphegor said, lounging nearby. Her appearance was regal yet relaxed, her demeanor matching her domain. I hear you've got potential if you can be bothered to use it. Walker raised an eyebrow. And if I can't? Belphegor chuckled. Then you'll fit right in. Welcome home, my heir. And Flashback. So where has my cousin gone to? Walker asked as Barbie set out breakfast and replied, Charlie's out trying to find a sponsor for the hotel. That's one of the conditions her cousins set when they visited yesterday. Walker blinked, his groggy expression fading into mild disappointment. Yesterday? Huh. Wish I'd seen them. Barbie raised an eyebrow. You were passed out in your room again, weren't you? He shrugged. guilty as charged. Despite his nonchalant tone, Walker couldn't help but think about ISSEI, Aika, Matsuda, and Motohama. Their relationship had always been easygoing, even back when they were alive. They'd understood his personality, the laziness, the coin flips, the refusal to stress about anything. It had been mutual. They didn't nag him to change, and he respected them for it. Barbie rolled her eyes, drawing him back to the present. Well, Charlie's got her hands full. Her cousins don't make things easy, but she's determined to keep the hotel running. You know how she is. Walker nodded, flipping his coin into the air. Yeah, I know. What about Belle? She lecturing me about hard work again? Barbie smirked. Of course she is. She was here earlier, muttering something about the potential and wasted talent. You know, the usual, Walker chuckled. Troublesome woman. She's lazier than me but still acts like she's my life coach. He stood, stretching. Don't get me wrong, though. She's family. In her weird way. Walker had always found Belphagore's lectures ironic. She'd lounge around in her throne of cushions, yawning as she told him to put in some effort for once. He'd argue back, calling her hypocritical, but there was an undeniable fondness between them. Belphegor treated Walker like a son, guiding him in her roundabout way. She recognized his sharp intellect and encouraged him to use it, not out of duty but because she genuinely believed in him. Walker, she'd say, half asleep in her throne, you've got a good head on your shoulders. Please don't waste it. The sloth ring doesn't mean no effort, you know. Walker would groan and wave her off. Yeah, I get it. You're so inspiring. But deep down, he valued her advice, even if he never admitted outright. Walker's bond with the other disciples of sin was more like that of siblings or cousins. They treated each other with a mix of teasing and genuine care. Walker, get up more, one of them would nag. You're always holed up in your room. Maybe I like it that way, he'd retort, flipping his coin. Less noisy. Despite the occasional annoyance, Walker considered them family. He'd help them with their schemes and offer advice when needed, and they, in turn, dragged him out of his comfort zone. Walker had a special connection with his Aunt Beelzebub and Uncle Mammon. Beelzebub, despite her gluttonous nature, often shared quiet moments with Walker over food, appreciating his laid-back demeanor. Mammon, on the other hand, saw potential in Walker's sharp financial mind. He'd taken him under his wing, teaching him the intricacies of business and money management, as he did with Motohama before the snake started his own business and took over the mafia. You've got a natural talent, Mammon would say, tossing a ledger onto the table. If you weren't so lazy, you'd be running hell's biggest casino by now, Walker smirked. Yeah, but then I'd actually have to work. No thanks. Still, Walker respected Mammon's lessons and often found himself applying his strategies, whether he admitted it or not. So, Walker said, flipping his coin as he leaned against the doorframe. Charlie's handling the sponsor thing. Anything I actually need to do today, or can I get back to my cushions? Barbie gave him a long-suffering look. There's always something you could do, Walker. The hotel needs all the help it can get. He flipped the coin again. Heads, help out. Tails, go back to bed. The coin landed in his palm. Tails, guess it's not my lucky day, he said with a grin. Barbie sighed. You're impossible. Yeah, Walker said, slipping the coin into his pocket. But you'd miss me if I wasn't. Barbie couldn't help but smirk as the two ate, with Walker being farther away and asking Barbie about minor things as they enjoyed each other's company before they finished breakfast. Barbie decided to take her 30-minute break and took him for a leisurely walk at the park, where Walker enjoyed going for the flowers. Barbie smiled, seeing Walker come out of his slothful side and enjoy the beauty of hell. However, one person who was interested in interviewing said disciple about the Princess of Hell and her happy hotel, Velvet, the overlord of fashion and social media, peered through her binoculars from the top of the V-Tower, the sleek, dark windows reflecting the perpetual crimson sky of hell. She adjusted the focus, honing in on the figures moving near the entrance of Hazbin Hotel. Her keen eye caught sight of two distinct individuals, Walker, with his imposing stature and the eerie air of authority, and Barbie Wire. Velvet's lips curled into an excited grin. Oh, this is perfect, she muttered to herself, already imagining the headlines for her next broadcast in Vox's headlines. Inside the princess's vision, Hazbin Hotel and its unlikely allies. With a quick flourish, Velvet grabbed her recording equipment, a high-tech, jewel-encrusted microphone and camera drone, and hurried down the tower. Her producers had been pushing for something new, something that would shake Hell's stagnant media landscape, and this was it. An exclusive interview with two of the most intriguing figures tied to Charlie's controversial redemption project. As she made her way to the hotel grounds, she practiced her approach. Walker. Barbie. She rehearsed, mimicking her most charming tone. Velvet from VNN. Do you care to share your thoughts on the princess's grand experiment? Surely someone as influential as you has an opinion on Hell's boldest endeavor yet. By the time Velvet reached them, Walker and Barbie were standing near the hotel's gates. Their conversation was seemingly light but loaded with unspoken tension. Barbie gestured animatedly while Walker's cold, calculating gaze scanned the surroundings as if sensing an unseen threat. Velvet cleared her throat and stepped forward, her drone buzzing to life and hovering just above her shoulder. Walker. Barbie. A moment of your time, if you will. Both figures turned to her, their expressions shifting in unison, Barbie's to curiosity, Walker's to mild irritation. And who might you be? Walker asked, his deep voice laced with suspicion. Velvet flashed her brightest smile. Velvet, star correspondent for Vox News Network and the overlord of fashion and social media. I couldn't help but notice your presence near the Princess of Hell's pet project, and I thought, what better opportunity to get some insight into what you think about her efforts to rehabilitate Hell's denizens. Care to comment? Barbie arched an eyebrow, her lips curling into a smirk. Huh. You're bold, I'll give you that. Not every day someone waltzes up to us asking for sound bites. Walker, however, remained stoic, his gaze narrowing as he studied Velvet. The princess's project is of no concern to me. If it succeeds or fails, Hell remains Hell. Velvet tilted her head, feigning disappointment. Oh, come now, surely you have some thoughts. A man of your gravitas must see the implications of this little experiment, don't you think? Barbie let out a sharp laugh, stepping closer. He might not care, but I've got plenty to say. This place? It's ambitious, I'll give Charlie that. But come on, redemption in Hell? It's like trying to teach a snake to sing. It ain't gonna happen, sweetheart. Velvet's grin widened. Fascinating. And what about you, Walker? Surely you have more to add. Walker sighed, a flicker of something inscrutable crossing his face before it vanished. Ambition is a dangerous thing. It blinds people to reality. If the princess's project collapses, the fallout will be enlightening. Velvet's camera drone zoomed in, capturing every word. Ah, so you predict failure? And yet you're here. Watching. Why? Walker's eyes locked onto hers, his voice dropping to a low, almost menacing tone. Because I'm curious. That's all you'll get from me, Velvet. Barbie chuckled, throwing an arm around Walker's shoulder. And that's more than he usually gives anyone. So, consider yourself lucky, Miss Velvet. Velvet beamed, satisfied with the footage. Well, thank you both. This interview will make for a fantastic segment. You've been wonderful. As she turned to leave, her mind raced with ideas for the piece. Behind her, Barbie and Walker exchanged a glance, their shared smirk suggesting they knew far more about Hazbin Hotel's fate than they were willing to share. Velvet knew this, which is why when she saw a flyer for interviews at said hotel, it made her smile. She thought this was a big moment for her to gain new followers and also get some info on the inside. Now, this is going to be fun, Velvet said as she went to her home to change into a more businesslike yet fashionable outfit for her interview. After all, who else would want an interview with a pathetic project like the Happy Hotel? Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Nefarious Doctor for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.